Centuries before the rise of shinobi, a legendary swordsman wielded the black blade to unite warring factions. The blade was said to hold unimaginable power, capable of cutting through mountains, armies, and even reality itself. Fearing its misuse, the blade was hidden in the ruins of Uzushiagakuer, sealed with powerful chakra barriers. Naruto Uzumaki, the pariah of Konoha, often sought solace in the forests surrounding the village. It was the only place where the hateful whispers of the villagers couldn't reach him. Their scornful eyes, the accusing glares, and the murmurs that followed him like shadows were things he could not escape within the village walls. But out here, amidst the towering trees and rustling leaves, Naruto could be himself. He could scream, cry, and train without judgment. On one such day, as the orange hues of sunset painted the sky, Naruto collapsed onto the ground after a grueling session of shadow clone training. Sweat drenched his tattered clothes, and his knuckles were raw from punching a tree for hours. His cerulean eyes scanned the horizon, lost in thought. Why do they hate me? The question had haunted him for as long as he could remember. No matter how hard he tried to earn their acceptance, he was always met with disdain. Frustrated, Naruto stood up and decided to head back to the village, but a glint of something unusual caught his eye. Curiosity piqued, he followed the faint shimmer to a small pile of stones near a stream. Hidden beneath them was an aged scroll. The parchment bore the Uzumaki clan's spiral emblem, a symbol Naruto recognized but knew little about. "What's this doing here?" he murmured, brushing the dirt off the scroll. Carefully, he unrolled it. The intricate calligraphy spoke of a legendary blade hidden in the ruins of Uzushiagakuer, the ancestral home of the Uzumaki clan. The words seemed to hum with an ancient energy. To the heir of Uzumaki blood, the blade Yoru awaits the worthy. Its power shall awaken in the hands of one with unyielding will. Naruto's heart raced. A blade tied to his clan? He had never felt connected to his heritage, but this was something he couldn't ignore. It felt like destiny calling out to him. That night, Naruto couldn't sleep. His mind was consumed by the contents of the scroll. He had heard whispers about Uzushiagakuer from passing conversations and fragmented lessons in the academy. The village, once a symbol of strength, had been destroyed during the last Great War. It was said to be cursed, a place of death and despair. Despite the warnings, Naruto's resolve hardened. If this blade could give him power, recognition, and perhaps answers about his clan, then he would risk everything to find it. Under the cover of darkness, Naruto packed what little supplies he had, a canteen of water, some stale bread, and a kunai. He tucked the scroll into his jacket and slipped out of his apartment. The streets of Konoha were eerily silent, save for the occasional patrol of Umbu operatives. With a mixture of luck and stealth, he evaded detection and made his way to the village gates. The journey to Uzushiagakuer was arduous. Guided by the map etched into the scroll, Naruto trekked through dense forests, crossed rivers, and scaled rocky cliffs. The land grew more treacherous with every step, but Naruto's determination pushed him forward. After 3 days of travel, he finally reached the outskirts of the ruins. Uzushiagakuer lay in shambles, a ghost of its former glory. Crumbled walls, overgrown vegetation, and shattered statues painted a picture of devastation. Yet, amidst the desolation, Naruto felt a strange pull, as if the village itself was alive and guiding him. The scroll's instructions led him to the center of the ruins, where a massive whirlpool-shaped emblem was carved into the ground. Naruto placed his hand on the symbol, and the earth beneath him trembled. A hidden passage revealed itself, descending into darkness. The air inside the chamber was thick with an ancient, foreboding aura. Torches along the walls flickered to life as Naruto stepped deeper into the underground sanctum. At the end of the corridor, he found a pedestal, and resting upon it was the blade. Yoru was unlike anything Naruto had ever seen. The black blade gleamed ominously, its intricate design exuding a sense of both elegance and menace. As he approached, a voice resonated in the chamber. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" Naruto froze, his eyes darting around the room. The voice was deep and commanding, yet there was no one else in sight. I'm Naruto Uzumaki," he said, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. "I've come to claim the blade." A low chuckle echoed through the chamber. "And Uzumaki, at last. Tell me, boy, what drives you to seek Yoru? Is it power? Revenge? Or something more?" Naruto's fists clenched. "I want to prove myself. I'm tired of being treated like I'm nothing. If this blade can make me stronger, then I'll do whatever it takes." The voice fell silent for a moment, as if weighing Naruto's words. Then, it spoke again. "Very well. Take the blade, but know this, Yoru chooses its wielder. If your will falters, it will consume you." Naruto hesitated only briefly before stepping forward. He reached out and grasped the hilt of the blade. The moment his fingers wrapped around it, a surge of energy coursed through his body. His vision blurred, and he found himself standing in a void. Before him stood a man with hawk-like eyes and a cape that billowed despite the lack of wind. "You have courage, boy," the man said. "I am Dracul Mihawk, the spirit bound to this blade. If you wish to wield Yoru, you must prove your worth." Naruto squared his shoulders, meeting Mihawk's piercing gaze. "I'll do whatever it takes." A faint smile tugged at Mihawk's lips. "Then let us begin." Naruto's trial was unlike anything he had ever experienced. In the void, he faced illusions of his darkest fears and insecurities. The villagers' hatred, the loneliness that gnawed at his soul, and the shadows of his past threatened to overwhelm him. But each time he faltered, he forced himself to rise again. "You are stubborn, I'll give you that," Mihawk said after what felt like an eternity. "But stubbornness alone will not suffice. Show me your resolve." Naruto's determination flared like a wildfire. Clutching Yoru tightly, he shouted, "I'll never give up. No matter what, I'll keep moving forward." A powerful surge of energy erupted from the blade, enveloping Naruto in a golden glow. Mihawk's expression softened. "You have passed," he said. "Yoru is now yours to wield. But remember, power is a double-edged sword. Wield it wisely." With those words, the void dissolved, and Naruto found himself back in the chamber. The blade hummed in his hand, a testament to the bond he had forged with it. As Naruto emerged from the ruins of Uzushiagakuer, Yoru strapped to his back, he felt a newfound sense of purpose. For the first time in his life, he had something that was truly his. The villagers' hatred no longer mattered. With Yoru by his side, he would carve his own path and show the world that Naruto Uzumaki was not to be underestimated. The moment Naruto's fingers curled around Yoru's hilt, the blade pulsed with an energy so intense it felt as though the air itself was being sucked into a vortex. A wave of raw power rippled outward, shaking the very foundations of the chamber. Naruto stumbled back, his body tingling with a sensation he had never felt before, a blend of exhilaration and overwhelming force. The pulse of energy didn't go unnoticed. Nearby, a group of shinobi from the Land of Water on a reconnaissance mission felt the tremor. Their leader, a jonin with a keen sense for chakra fluctuations, turned sharply toward the source. "What was that?" one of the Chunin asked, his voice laced with apprehension. "A surge of chakra," the jonin replied, narrowing his eyes. "And not just any chakra. This is ancient." He signaled his team to move. "Stay alert. Whatever caused that could be dangerous." Back in the chamber, Naruto's vision blurred as the energy from Yoru began to course through him. His mind was bombarded with flashes of battles fought with elegance and precision, countless foes felled by the blade in his hand. He saw a man with hawk-like eyes cutting through ships and mountains as if they were paper. Each vision seared itself into Naruto's consciousness, leaving behind fragments of knowledge and instinct. What What is this? Naruto whispered, his voice trembling. The spirit of Mihawk, the legendary swordsman bound to yours, spoke directly to his mind. This is the beginning of your awakening. The blade has chosen you, but its power comes at a price. Master it, and you may yet become worthy. Naruto's grip tightened on the hilt. The words fueled a fire within him. For so long, he had been treated as nothing more than a nuisance, a vessel for the Nine Tails. This was his chance to become something greater, to forge his own destiny. With a deep breath, Naruto steadied himself and began the journey back to Konoha. The trek through the ruins of Uzushiagaku felt different this time. Yora's presence seemed to imbue him with a heightened awareness. He could sense the faintest rustle of leaves, the shift in the wind, and even the distant presence of the approaching shinobi. The shinobi team from the Land of Water arrived at the ruins minutes after Naruto had left. They examined the area, noting the residual chakra that lingered in the air. Someone was here, the Jonin said, running his hand over the cracked pedestal where Yora had rested. And they took something powerful. Should we pursue them? A Jonin asked. The Jonin hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Whoever it is, they're heading toward the Land of Fire. We need to know what they've unleashed. Naruto reached Konoha under the cover of night, Yora wrapped in cloth and strapped to his back. His body ached from the journey, but his mind buzzed with an urgency he couldn't ignore. He had to understand the blade's power. Slipping into the forest outside the village, he began to train in secret. At first, Yora felt unwieldy in his hands. The blade was longer and heavier than anything he had used before. But as he swung it, the fragments of Mihawk's memories resurfaced, guiding his movements. Each swing became more precise, more controlled. Within hours, Naruto was performing techniques he had never seen before, cutting through thick tree trunks with ease and slicing boulders clean in two. This is incredible, Naruto murmured, panting as he lowered the blade. But the power came with a cost. Each swing drained his chakra, leaving him fatigued. Mihawk's voice echoed in his mind. Yoru is not just a weapon, it is a partner. To wield it properly, you must balance your strength with its will. Naruto gritted his teeth. I'll get stronger. I'll master this, no matter what it takes. Days turned into weeks as Naruto trained relentlessly. His progress did not go unnoticed. The villagers, who had always seen him as a nuisance, began to sense a change in him. Naruto's once clumsy demeanor was replaced with a quiet confidence. His movements were sharper, his posture straighter. He no longer walked with his head down, avoiding their glares. Instead, he met their eyes with an intensity that made them uneasy. Have you noticed Naruto lately? One villager whispered to another. He's different. He's probably up to something, another replied, scowling. That demon child is always causing trouble. Naruto heard the whispers but didn't let them affect him. If anything, they fueled his resolve. He spent every moment he could in the forest, pushing himself to the brink. The more he trained, the more Yora seemed to respond to him, its black blade glowing faintly with each swing. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Naruto stood before a massive cliffside. He tightened his grip on Yoru and focused his chakra. With a deep breath, he swung the blade in a wide arc. A crescent of energy erupted from the sword, slicing clean through the rock face and leaving a deep gash in its wake. Naruto stared at the result, his chest heaving. I did it? Mihawk's voice resonated in his mind. You're progressing faster than I expected. But remember, strength without control is meaningless. Discipline yourself, or this power will consume you. Naruto nodded, his determination unwavering. I won't stop until I've mastered this. I'll show everyone that I'm not just some loser. Meanwhile, the shinobi from the Land of Water had infiltrated the outskirts of Konoha. They observed the village from a distance, their eyes scanning for any sign of the mysterious figure who had taken Yoru. "We've tracked the chakra's signature to this area," the Jonin said. "Keep your eyes open. Whoever it is, they're not to be underestimated." Unbeknownst to them, Naruto's training had not gone unnoticed by the Umbu. Reports of strange chakra fluctuations and unusual activity in the forest had reached the Hokage's ears. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the third Hokage, watched Naruto from his crystal ball with a mix of curiosity and concern. "What are you up to, Naruto?" he muttered, stroking his beard. "And where did you get that blade?" Naruto's secret training came to a head one fateful night. As he practiced a new technique, the shinobi from the land of water finally caught up to him. Emerging from the shadows, they surrounded him, their weapons drawn. "Hand over the blade, boy," the Jonin demanded, his voice cold and commanding. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Naruto tightened his grip on Yoru, his eyes narrowing. "I don't know who you are, but I'm not giving up this sword. If you want it, you'll have to take it from me." The Jonin smirked. "Very well. Let's see what you're made of." As the shinobi charged, Naruto's instincts honed through weeks of grueling training and Mihawk's guidance kicked in. Yoru moved with him, its blade a blur of black steel as he parried and countered their attacks. The forest echoed with the clash of metal and the shouts of battle. For the first time in his life, Naruto felt truly alive. The villagers' hatred, his loneliness, his doubts, none of it mattered now. With Yoru in his hands, he was unstoppable. As the battle reached its climax, the shinobi retreated, their leader glaring at Naruto with a mix of anger and respect. "This isn't over," the Jonin said. "You may have the blade, but you're far from mastering it. And there are others who will come for it." Naruto watched them disappear into the shadows, his chest heaving with exertion. He looked down at Yoru, its blade gleaming faintly in the moonlight. "Let them come," he muttered. "I'll show them all what I'm capable of." As he stood there, the weight of his journey settled on his shoulders. He was no longer just Naruto Uzumaki, the outcast of Konoha. He was the wielder of Yoru, and his path was only beginning. The sun rose over Konoha, its warm rays casting a golden hue on the village below. For Naruto Uzumaki, it marked the beginning of another grueling day at the academy. Unlike his peers, who carried carefree smiles and shared stories of their families, Naruto walked to the training grounds alone, clutching his newfound blade, Yoru, hidden beneath a worn cloth. Today was survival training, a test designed to gauge the student's ability to adapt and work as a team in the face of adversity. Iruka-sensei stood at the clearing, clipboard in hand, his usual warm demeanor tinged with seriousness. Groups of students chatted excitedly, but Naruto's presence was met with sneers and whispered insults. "Look who decided to show up," sneered Kiba, leaning against a tree. "The dead last. Hope you don't drag your team down, loser." Naruto gritted his teeth but said nothing, his fingers tightening around the concealed blade. "All right, listen up." Iruka's voice cut through the chatter. "Today, you'll be divided into teams to retrieve a set of scrolls hidden in the forest. Work together, strategize, and remember no excessive violence." His gaze briefly rested on Naruto, concern flickering in his eyes. As teams were assigned, Naruto found himself paired with two of his harshest critics, Kiba and Sakura. Both groaned audibly, making no attempt to hide their disdain. "Why do we have to be stuck with him?" Sakura muttered, crossing her arms. "Don't worry," Kiba smirked. "We'll just carry the team like always." Naruto clenched his fists but kept his head down. He had grown used to their barbs, but today was different. Today, he had Yoru. The team ventured into the dense forest, the rustling of leaves and distant chirping of birds the only sounds accompanying them. Sakura took charge, her tone condescending as she barked orders. "Kiba, scout ahead with Akamaru. Naruto, stay out of the way." Naruto bit back a retort, instead focusing on the scroll's location. The energy of the blade hummed faintly against his side, as though sensing his frustration. After an hour of trekking, the team stumbled upon a small clearing. Nestled within was a wooden box, their objective. However, as they approached, a group of older students emerged from the shadows, their smirks predatory. "Looks like we've got some competition," one of them drawled, cracking his knuckles. "Hand over the scroll, and we might go easy on you." Sakura and Kiba froze, their confidence evaporating. Naruto stepped forward, his hand instinctively moving to Yoru. "We're not backing down," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. The leader of the bullies laughed. "Oh, look. The loser thinks he's a hero. Let's teach him a lesson." Before anyone could react, one of the bullies lunged at Naruto. In a blur, Yoru was unsheathed. The blade seemed to move on its own, its edge glinting ominously in the dappled sunlight. Naruto swung, unleashing a precise, massive shockwave that ripped through the clearing, uprooting trees, and sending his attackers sprawling. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of leaves fluttering to the ground. Kiba and Sakura stared at Naruto, their mouths agape. Even the bullies, now sprawled on the forest floor, looked at him with a mixture of fear and awe. "What the hell was that?" Kiba whispered, his bravado gone. Naruto sheathed Yoru, his expression unreadable. "I told you, I'm not backing down." Back at the academy, word of the incident spread like wildfire. By the time Naruto and his team returned, a crowd had gathered, their murmurs filling the air. "Did you hear?" Naruto took out a group of older students by himself. "Yeah, but did you see that blade? Where did he get something like that?" Irika's face was a mix of shock and concern as he pulled Naruto aside. "Naruto, what happened out there? What is that sword?" Naruto hesitated, his hand instinctively moving to the hilt of Yoru. "It's just a sword I found. That's all." "Naruto, this is serious," Irika pressed. "That weapon, it's not ordinary. The power you displayed, it's dangerous." Naruto's eyes hardened. "Dangerous? Isn't that what everyone already thinks I am? This sword, it's the only thing that's ever made me feel strong. I'm not giving it up." Irika sighed, recognizing the stubborn determination in Naruto's gaze. "We'll talk about this later. For now, just be careful." News of the incident soon reached the Hokage's office. Hiruzen Sarutobi leaned back in his chair, his expression grave as he listened to Irika's report. A sword with that kind of power in Naruto's hands, Hiruzen mused. This could change everything. Danzo, seated in the shadows, spoke up. "The boy is already a threat, given his status as the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Now, with this blade, he's even more dangerous. We should confiscate it immediately. And risk alienating him further." Hiruzen countered. "No. We must tread carefully. If nurtured properly, this could be an asset for Konoha." Danzo's eyes narrowed. "Or it could be our undoing." That evening, Naruto stood on the roof of his apartment, gazing at the blade in his hands. The energy emanating from Yoru was both comforting and intimidating, a constant reminder of the responsibility it carried. "You're different," he murmured to the blade, as though it could hear him. "You make me feel alive." For the first time, Naruto felt a spark of hope. With Yoru, he could carve a path out of the shadows. He could prove to everyone that he wasn't just the village's outcast. He was Naruto Uzumaki, and he would become something greater, a force to be reckoned with. But deep within Yoru, the spirit of Mihawk stirred, its presence faint but growing. The blade's true power was still dormant, waiting for the moment when its wielder would fully awaken. The forest was still, save for the faint rustle of leaves caught in the wind. It was a stark contrast to the tumultuous storm that raged inside Naruto's heart. He stood in the clearing, his hands gripped tightly around the hilt of the sword he had discovered. Its blade gleamed under the light of the setting sun, almost alive with an energy that called to him, urging him to grow stronger. Naruto closed his eyes, his breath steady, trying to block out the chaos that often consumed his mind. The spirit of the blade was more than just an ancient weapon. It had awakened something deep within him, something that demanded focus and discipline. For the first time, Naruto realized that his usual brash and unpredictable nature wouldn't help him here. This sword required more than just power. It demanded control. The wind whispered around him, and with it came the unmistakable presence of another. "Is that all?" came a voice, calm yet powerful, piercing the silence. Naruto's eyes snapped open, and before him stood a figure, a man draped in dark, flowing robes, his eyes sharp and piercing. He was taller than Naruto, his expression unreadable but filled with the kind of quiet strength that Naruto couldn't ignore. The man's presence radiated authority, as if he were a king in a land of peasants. He stood there with an aura of someone who had seen the very depths of battle and understood what it meant to wield true power. Naruto instinctively dropped into a defensive stance, his grip tightening around the sword. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady but his mind racing. The man smiled, a thin, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. "I am Mihawk, the world's greatest swordsman. Or, at least, I once was. But you already knew that." Naruto's eyes widened. Mihawk? The name was legendary. Even in a world of ninjas and jutsu, Mihawk's reputation as a master swordsman was one that transcended time and space. But how? How could the spirit of such a warrior appear to him? You're dead," Naruto muttered, trying to make sense of what was happening. Mihawk's gaze never wavered. "Yes, but not all spirits fade. Some remain, bound to the very forces they once commanded." His gaze moved to the sword Naruto held. "And that blade, young one, binds me to you." Naruto stared at the blade, feeling its weight once more. The power within it was undeniable, but he could feel the weight of Mihawk's words, too. This was no mere weapon. It was a tool of discipline. A test. Mihawk stepped forward, his presence overwhelming yet oddly comforting. "You seek power, but power is not simply strength or speed. It is precision, focus, and control." Naruto frowned, his fingers tightening around the sword. "But I already have power. I've trained harder than anyone, and I fought my way through every challenge that's come my way." Mihawk's sharp eyes softened, though only slightly. "You misunderstand. Strength alone does not make a warrior. It makes a brute. A warrior masters his mind before he masters his sword. Without focus, you are like a wild storm, powerful but erratic, destructive." Naruto opened his mouth to argue, but Mihawk's intense gaze silenced him. There was an authority in the swordsman's eyes that Naruto had never encountered before. He felt an overwhelming pressure to listen. "Let me show you," Mihawk said, and before Naruto could react, the spirit's hand reached out and placed his own palm gently on the blade of the sword. "Hold it as I do. Let the blade become an extension of your will." Naruto's muscles tensed, instinct telling him to resist, but Mihawk's presence was so commanding that he found himself unable to do anything but comply. His hands moved, adjusting the grip, aligning the sword with his body as Mihawk guided him through the motions. The spirit's touch was light but firm, and for the first time, Naruto felt a connection to the blade not just as a weapon, but as an extension of his very soul. "Now, breathe," Mihawk instructed, his voice low and steady. "Feel the rhythm of your breath, and let it guide your movement." Naruto took a deep breath, focusing all his energy on the blade in his hand. The sword was no longer just a piece of metal, it was part of him, and with every breath, he felt more and more in sync with its weight and balance. Mihawk's voice was patient, unhurried. "In battle, you must never act out of emotion or instinct alone. They will fail you when the stakes are highest. You must be calm. You must be precise. Naruto's brow furrowed in concentration. Calm. It was a foreign concept to him. His whole life had been about defying the odds, charging forward with reckless abandon. But as he stood there, with the sword in his hands and Mihawk's spirit guiding him, something began to shift inside him. Focus, Mihawk continued, his presence unwavering. The blade is not your enemy. It is a reflection of your will. You wield it, or it will wield you. Naruto felt a sharp pang of realization. All this time, he had wielded his chakra and his power without thinking, without discipline. He had fought because it was all he knew, but he had never truly considered the art of fighting. The craft. The responsibility. And that's when Mihawk's next words hit him like a thunderclap. Power is nothing without responsibility, Mihawk said, his tone turning serious, almost somber. With the strength you now possess, there will be those who look to you for leadership, for guidance. They will follow you, or they will try to stop you. You must decide, Naruto. Will you be the storm that destroys, or will you be the calm that leads? Naruto's grip on the sword tightened once more, but this time it wasn't out of anger or frustration. It was resolve. The weight of Mihawk's words settled deep within him, and for the first time, he began to understand what it meant to be truly powerful. It wasn't about being feared. It wasn't about domination. It was about control. About knowing when to fight, when to hold back, and when to lead. You must decide what kind of warrior you will be, Mihawk said, his voice softer now, almost like a distant echo. The blade is a tool, Naruto. But your heart, that is where your true strength lies. Naruto looked down at the blade in his hand. For a moment, he saw not just the gleam of steel but the reflection of his own face, strong, determined, yet unpolished. The sword had been a gift, yes, but it was also a challenge. A challenge to rise above his own impulses and become something greater. He looked up at Mihawk, and for the first time, he saw not just a teacher, but a mentor. The man had passed his own trials and come out stronger for them. Mihawk was a living testament to the idea that true strength wasn't about power, it was about mastery of oneself. Naruto nodded slowly. I understand, he said, his voice steady. It's not just about strength. It's about becoming stronger in my mind and heart, too. Mihawk's eyes gleamed with approval. Well said. Now, go. There is much more to learn, and your journey is just beginning. With that, Mihawk's form began to fade, his presence dissolving into the air like smoke. But Naruto knew that the swordsman's spirit would remain with him. As he turned and faced the horizon, the weight of the blade felt lighter in his hands. It was no longer just a symbol of power. It was a reminder of the responsibility that came with it. Naruto took a deep breath, letting the calm settle within him. He had much to learn, but he was ready. The path ahead would not be easy, but he would walk it with the same precision, focus, and discipline that Mihawk had taught him. He would become the warrior he was always meant to be. The moon hung high in the sky, casting its silver glow over the forest surrounding Konoha. Naruto stood alone in the clearing, the weight of the blade Yoru heavy in his hands. His mind raced as he recalled Mihawk's teachings. Precision, control, and discipline. The sword had become an extension of himself, each swing calculated and deliberate. The growth he had experienced since picking up Yoru was unlike any training he had undergone before. But with power came attention, and not all of it welcome. Naruto's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden rustle of leaves. His senses were sharp, his focus intense. He had become more attuned to his surroundings, able to detect the faintest shifts in the air. He wasn't alone. The silence that followed was more than just stillness, it was an ominous calm, like the world itself was holding its breath. A figure emerged from the shadows, an unremarkable man, at least in appearance. But Naruto's instincts flared. He recognized the cold, calculating presence. It was Danzo. Impressive. Danzo's gravelly voice cut through the stillness, his one visible eye scanning Naruto with interest. Your skill with that blade is growing, but we must test how well you wield it in a real confrontation. Naruto narrowed his eyes, his hand tightening around Yoru. What do you want, Danzo? Danzo's lips twitched into a thin smile. I simply want to see whether you are a tool for Konoha, or a threat. The villagers, too, are starting to question what you are becoming. Your power cannot go unchecked. Naruto's heart skipped a beat. He had felt the eyes of the villagers on him, but this was different. This wasn't just a few whispers. This was something much more serious. They viewed him as a potential weapon, something to control or eliminate if necessary. His pulse quickened, but he steadied himself, remembering Mihawk's words. You can test me all you want, Danzo, Naruto said, his voice low and steady. But don't think for a second that I'll let anyone use me as a tool. Danzo's smile faded. His eyes glinted with a cold, calculating resolve. Without another word, he raised his hand, and from the shadows, several figures emerged. Rude agents. Silent, deadly, and unwavering in their loyalty to him. Naruto's grip on Yoru tightened, his mind already assessing the situation. He could sense the danger in the air. These agents weren't ordinary. They had been trained to deal with threats, to neutralize dangerous elements. The cold efficiency in their movements spoke volumes. They were not here to talk. Don't hold back, Danzo called out, his voice still as calm as ever. Show me what you're capable of. Naruto didn't waste a second. His body moved instinctively, his senses heightened as Mihawk's teachings flooded his mind. The first agent lunged, swift and deadly. But Naruto was faster, his footwork precise as he sidestepped the attack. With a swift movement, he raised Yoru and cleaved through the air. The agent's weapon shattered, and the man staggered back, shock evident on his face. Naruto wasn't finished. He pressed the attack, each movement calculated, each swing of Yoru deliberate. His style was not wild or chaotic, it was cold, clinical, and efficient. Another agent came at him from the side, but Naruto anticipated the move, using his blade to parry the strike before countering with a low sweep that sent the agent tumbling to the ground. Mihawk's voice echoed in Naruto's mind. The blade must be an extension of your will. Focus. Precision. Control. Naruto took a deep breath and centered himself, his eyes narrowing. The remaining agents were circling him now, their movements more cautious, recognizing the danger he posed. But Naruto wasn't going to give them the chance to regroup. He was in complete control, moving like a predator. Another agent rushed at him from behind, but Naruto pivoted just in time, his blade cutting through the air with a swiftness that left the agent no time to react. The man's body collapsed to the ground, his weapon clattering against the stone. Naruto didn't flinch. He was already moving again. The remaining two agents hesitated, looking to Danzo for guidance. Naruto's gaze flickered briefly to the man who had orchestrated this ambush. Danzo's expression remained unchanged, but Naruto could feel the tension in the air. Danzo had underestimated him just as everyone else always had. With a roar, the last two agents attacked at once, their movements in perfect sync. But Naruto had already read their pattern. He twirled Yoru effortlessly, blocking one of the agent's blades with a sharp clang. In the same motion, he swept the other agent off his feet with a low kick, then brought the blade down with brutal precision. The remaining agent tried to strike, but Naruto was already on top of him, his blade poised for a fatal blow. The agent froze, his eyes wide with fear. He knew he had lost. Naruto's breath came in short bursts, his heart pounding in his chest. But his expression remained calm, his grip on the sword steady. The agents lay scattered around him, defeated and incapacitated. Not a single one had landed a blow. He slowly turned his gaze back to Danzo. The old man's face remained impassive, but there was a glimmer of something in his eye, something Naruto couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Respect? Or simply the recognition of a threat that couldn't be controlled? You've done well, Danzo said, his voice devoid of emotion. But know this, Konoha will not tolerate a weapon that can't be controlled. And you, Naruto, are a weapon. Remember that. Naruto's expression hardened. His heart was heavy with the weight of Danzo's words. Was this really how Konoha saw him? Was he just a weapon to be wielded, a tool in the hands of those in power? As Danzo's figure retreated into the shadows, Naruto's grip tightened on Yoru. The blade was warm in his hands, its presence a constant reminder of the path he was walking. Mihawk's teachings echoed in his mind. Power was nothing without discipline, but discipline meant nothing if it wasn't used for something greater than simply fighting. Naruto stood in the clearing, the moonlight casting long shadows over his form. His heart was torn. Konoha had never truly accepted him, had never seen him as anything more than a weapon. The people who were supposed to be his family, his allies, saw him as a threat to be controlled. A surge of anger rose within him, but he suppressed it. Mihawk had warned him about acting on emotion. This was not a time for rash decisions, not when he was still learning. But the question lingered, gnawing at his mind: was there any place for him in this village? Or was he destined to be cast aside like a tool, to be used until he was no longer needed? Naruto took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm that was building inside him. The power he had gained, was it a gift, or a curse? He wasn't sure yet. But one thing was certain, he would never allow himself to be anyone's puppet. He would carve his own path, no matter the cost. The night was silent once more, but the weight of Naruto's thoughts lingered, heavy and unyielding. The days leading up to the Chunin exams were filled with an air of excitement that was palpable throughout the village. The prospect of young shinobi testing their strength and skill on a grand stage was enough to stir the hearts of the villagers and the hidden villages beyond the gates of Konoha. Naruto could feel it too, though in a different way. Where others saw the exams as a chance for advancement, he saw it as a test, an opportunity to prove to himself, and to everyone else, that he was more than just a discarded weapon. He had been training relentlessly, not just with Yoru, but also with his chakra. Mihawk's teachings had instilled in him a sense of control and precision that he had never thought possible. No longer did he act on impulse or reckless energy. Now, his every movement was deliberate, as if the blade and his chakra were two sides of the same coin, working in perfect harmony. Mihawk had always said that mastery came through both mind and body, but it was the spirit that truly wielded the sword. Focus, Naruto. Your chakra and the blade must become one. When that happens, your strikes will carry more than just power, they'll carry purpose, Mihawk's voice echoed in his mind during one of their training sessions. Naruto stood in the training ground, his focus unshakable. The blade Yuri was heavy in his hands, but it no longer felt like an unfamiliar burden. Instead, it felt like an extension of his will, something he could rely on. He closed his eyes for a moment, visualizing the flow of his chakra, feeling the warmth of it pulsing through his veins. Slowly, carefully, he began to channel the chakra into the blade, imbuing it with his energy. At first, nothing happened. Then, with a slight flick of his wrist, Naruto felt the wind stir, gathering around the blade as if it were responding to his call. The blade, though immovable by ordinary means, vibrated slightly, as if alive. Now, he thought. Let the chakra flow. With a burst of concentration, Naruto swung the blade with all his might, and the air cracked with the force of his attack. The ground before him was split in a perfect arc, the wind release, crescent/cutting through the atmosphere with precision and force. Naruto stared at the damage with wide eyes, surprised by the result. I did it? I really did it? A sense of accomplishment washed over him. This technique, combining both his chakra and Mihawk's swordsmanship, felt different than anything he had done before. It wasn't just power, it was finesse. The blade had become an extension of his chakra, his mind, and his very being. As he stood there, panting lightly from the exertion, he heard a voice behind him. "That was impressive, Naruto." Sasuke's voice was cool as usual, but there was something sharper in it today, something that Naruto couldn't quite place. Naruto turned around, the blade still in his hands. "Thanks, Sasuke," he said, the words coming easily now. He had learned to appreciate praise not just from others, but from himself. Sasuke stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the blade. "What are you doing with that thing?" he asked, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "What do you mean?" Naruto asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's my sword. I'm training with it." Sasuke scoffed. "It's not just about swinging a blade around, Naruto. You need to have technique. Control. If you're just going to use it as a tool for brute force, you're going to get yourself killed." Naruto frowned, sensing the underlying tension in Sasuke's words. He had expected Sasuke to challenge him, to question his methods, but there was something else there too, something darker. A hint of jealousy, perhaps. "I'm not just swinging it around," Naruto retorted, his voice calm but firm. "I've been training to control it. To make it mine." Sasuke's eyes flickered with an emotion that Naruto couldn't fully understand. "Fine. But just remember, power alone won't make you strong." Naruto watched as Sasuke turned away, his back stiff, clearly not satisfied with the conversation. The moment felt heavier than it should have. Sasuke wasn't one to show weakness, but Naruto had always known there was a deep well of insecurity beneath the Uchiha's cool exterior. Sakura, who had been quietly observing the exchange from a distance, stepped forward as well. "You've been acting a little different, Naruto," she said, her voice soft but full of curiosity. "What do you mean?" Naruto asked, his brow furrowing. Sakura hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking to Sasuke, who was still walking away. "You've just been calmer. More confident. I mean, I'm glad you're not as reckless as before, but it's like you're a different person." Naruto's lips quirked into a small smile. "I guess I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. I've realized that if I want to be the best, I need to focus. No more running around acting like I'm invincible." Sakura smiled back at him. "That's good, Naruto. Really good." As the days passed, the atmosphere around Team 7 became charged with a strange undercurrent. Sasuke grew quieter, more withdrawn, while Sakura seemed torn between supporting Naruto's transformation and the tension she felt growing between the two boys. She could see it too, the subtle shift in Sasuke's behavior, the way he seemed to watch Naruto with a mixture of wariness and envy. The Chunin exams loomed closer with each passing day, and with it, Naruto's resolve only strengthened. This was his chance to prove that he was more than the broken, abandoned child the villagers thought him to be. He had worked so hard to get to this point, and now he had the power to back it up. But as much as he felt confident in his abilities, a small, nagging voice in the back of his mind reminded him of the greater challenge ahead. The Chunin exams weren't just about proving strength, they were about proving one's worth to others. Would the villagers see him as more than a tool, or would they continue to view him as something dangerous, something to be controlled? Naruto clenched his fists around a hilt of Yuru. This wasn't just about him. It was about everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed to get to this point. Mihawk's words echoed in his mind. True strength lies not in the blade, but in the heart of the one who wields it. With a deep breath, Naruto turned back toward the village, his path ahead clear. There was no turning back now. The Chunin exams would be his stage, his chance to show the world exactly who Naruto Uzumaki was. The tension continued to grow as the day of the exams arrived. Team 7 stood together in front of the Hokage's office, ready to face the first trial. Sasuke, as always, seemed calm and collected, though his eyes were colder than usual. Sakura was eager, though there was a nervousness in her voice that betrayed her outward confidence. And Naruto? He was ready. But as the three of them walked into the exam hall, it wasn't just the eyes of the villagers he felt. It was the eyes of everyone who had ever doubted him, who had ever looked at him like he was less than human. With a determined smile, he gripped Yura tightly. This is it, he thought. This is where I prove everything. Little did he know, the Chunin exams would test him in ways he never expected, not just in battle, but in the very heart of what it meant to be a shinobi. The Forest of Death was a place of legend. It was a testing ground for aspiring shinobi, a place where survival was as important as strength. The dense trees, poisonous plants, and hostile creatures made it a perfect environment for those brave enough to enter. But for Naruto, it was more than just a part of the Chunin exams. It was a challenge that would push him to his limits and beyond. As Naruto stepped into the entrance of the Forest of Death, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. The air felt heavier here, thick with the weight of danger. It wasn't like the controlled atmosphere of a sparring match or the training grounds. Here, the stakes were real, and there was no telling who or what would be waiting around every corner. His team, Sasuke, Sakura, and himself had drawn a relatively safe corner of the forest, but they weren't naive enough to believe that the danger would stay away. The other teams would be hunting for the scrolls they needed to progress, and Naruto knew that his team, especially with his growing reputation, would become a target. Sasuke was already on edge, his eyes constantly scanning the forest for any sign of movement. Sakura, though trying to mask her nerves, couldn't hide the tension in her posture. But Naruto? He felt a strange sense of calm. It was as though the forest had an energy that mirrored his own focus, his own resolve. The blade, Yoryu, was strapped to his back, and he could feel the weight of it, a constant reminder of the strength he had gained and the responsibility that came with it. His mind drifted back to Mihawk's words. You've come far, Naruto, but remember, the sword is not your only strength. Your mind is just as important. Stay focused. Naruto's grip tightened on the hilt of Yoryu. Mihawk had trained him well. The precision, the control, the discipline. He was no longer the same reckless boy who had first picked up the sword. But as the forest loomed around him, he could feel the ever-present danger closing in. His confidence had grown, but so had the understanding that there was still so much left to learn. They had only been walking for a few minutes when the first attack came. A shadow moved through the trees, swift and silent. Sasuke reacted instantly, his Sharingan flaring to life as he locked eyes with the intruder. But before he could react, the figure leaped from the shadows, revealing itself in a blur of motion. Orochimaru. The sinister snake-like shinobi stood before them, a twisted smile on his face. He was a figure that Naruto had heard of in hushed whispers, dangerous, unpredictable, and ruthless. But what caught Naruto's attention the most was the glint of interest in Orochimaru's eyes, fixed directly on him. Ah, so this is the boy. Orochimaru's voice slithered like a snake, cold and calculating. The one wielding that blade. Interesting, very interesting indeed. Naruto's hand instinctively moved toward Yoryu, his body tensing as he prepared for a confrontation. Sasuke stepped forward, ready to protect his teammates, but Orochimaru raised a hand, signaling that he meant no immediate harm. I'm not here for a fight, at least, not yet. I simply wish to observe. You wield that blade well, but I wonder. Orochimaru's eyes gleamed with wicked curiosity. Do you truly understand its power? Naruto narrowed his eyes, not backing down. I know what it can do, he said, his voice steady. And I'm not about to let someone like you take it from me. Orochimaru's smile grew wider, a dangerous grin that sent a chill down Naruto's spine. I think you'll find that this is a fight you cannot win, boy. but I admire your spirit. Let's see what you're made of. Without warning, Orochimaru lunged, his movements so fast that Naruto barely had time to react. But he had learned to trust his instincts, and as Orochimaru's strike came toward him, Naruto shifted his body, narrowly dodging the attack. The force of the blow left the air buzzing with residual chakra, a reminder of how much power the rogue ninja held. Naruto felt the thrill of battle rising in his chest. His fingers curled around a hilt of Yoru, and in that moment, he allowed his chakra to flow into the blade. His body moved on its own, his training kicking in as he slashed at Orochimaru with a precision he hadn't yet fully mastered, but the blade's power responded to his will. The slash cut through the air with a whistling sound, and Orochimaru had to leap back, barely avoiding the strike. The force of the blow left a deep gash in the ground where Orochimaru had been standing. Orochimaru's eyes widened for a split second, impressed by the power of the strike. "Interesting," he murmured. "You've grown stronger, but you still lack control." Before Naruto could respond, Orochimaru twisted his body and extended his arm, summoning snakes from the ground to entangle Naruto's legs. They hissed and slithered, constricting with surprising strength. Naruto's mind raced, but he didn't panic. He had trained to fight against overwhelming odds. With a deep breath, Naruto focused his chakra, allowing it to flow into his legs and arms. He twisted his body and swung Yoru with all his might, the blade cutting through the snakes with ease. The force of his strike sent the snakes flying, but Orochimaru was already in the air, his next attack coming in the form of a flurry of kunai aimed at Naruto's chest. Naruto moved quickly, spinning Yoru in a circular motion, deflecting the kunai with the flat of the blade. The impact reverberated through his arms, but he held firm, not allowing the onslaught to break his concentration. He could feel the growing power of his chakra, his control over the blade sharpening with every moment. Orochimaru landed a few yards away, his eyes fixed on Naruto. "Impressive," he said, his tone laced with amusement. "But you are still too inexperienced to defeat me. This blade may be strong, but it is only as powerful as the one who wields it." Naruto's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't waver. "I'm not done yet." With a sudden burst of chakra, Naruto surged forward, Yoru cutting through the air in a deadly arc. Orochimaru barely managed to dodge, but the slash grazed his arm, leaving a cut that seeped dark blood. Orochimaru hissed, more out of annoyance than pain. "You've grown stronger, but you're still no match for me," Orochimaru said, his eyes narrowing. "Still, I'll leave you for now. But remember, boy, power comes with a price." With that, Orochimaru disappeared into the trees, leaving behind a silent, tense atmosphere. Naruto stood still, panting heavily, his grip still tight on Yoru. The encounter had left him shaken, but something deeper lingered in his mind. I actually landed a hit on him. Orochimaru, the one who took down the fourth Hokage. I actually hurt him." As the adrenaline slowly wore off, Mihawk's voice echoed in his mind, a calming presence amidst the chaos. "You've done well, Naruto. But don't let this victory blind you. Confidence is important, but overconfidence can be fatal. You still have much to learn." Naruto exhaled, his grip on the blade relaxing. Mihawk's words were a sobering reminder of the path ahead. Despite his victory, he knew that he was far from mastering the blade or himself. There were still dangers out there that he couldn't even begin to fathom. Sasuke and Sakura approached him cautiously, both visibly relieved that the confrontation was over. Sasuke shot him a sharp look, though there was a trace of respect in it now. Sakura, on the other hand, seemed more worried than ever. "Are you okay, Naruto?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "I'm fine," Naruto replied, his voice steady. "Just a little shaken. But I'm okay." Sasuke eyed him carefully. "You did well. But you're lucky he didn't finish you off." Naruto's gaze hardened. "I'm not some weakling," he said, more to himself than to Sasuke. And I won't let anyone take me down. Not now. Not ever. As the team continued their journey through the forest of death, Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that the encounter with Orochimaru was only the beginning. There were more challenges ahead, challenges that would test not just his strength, but his very resolve. And with Mihawk's teachings, he would be ready for whatever came next. But deep inside, Naruto knew that true mastery wasn't just about the sword. It was about understanding the power within himself and learning to control it. For now, though, he had proven that he was more than just a boy with a sword. He was a force to be reckoned with. And that was only the beginning. The Chunin exams had come down to this. After all the challenges, all the battles, it was now time for the final rounds, the part where the real test of strength, skill, and willpower would be on full display. But for Naruto, this wasn't just about becoming a Chunin, it was about proving to the world who he was and what he could do. And it wasn't just his skills with chakra or his ninjutsu that he intended to show off this time, it was his mastery over the sword. His journey had led him to this point, where the power of Yoru, his blade, was just as important as the raw strength he had once relied on. As the crowd gathered in the arena, the air was thick with anticipation. Naruto stood at the edge of the battlefield, Yoru strapped to his back, his eyes fixed ahead. He was calm, focused more so than ever before. Mihawk's teachings had done more than just refine his swordsmanship, they had given him the ability to control his emotions, his chakra, and his very sense of self. He was no longer the reckless boy who had once sought attention at any cost. He had learned to trust in himself and the blade that had become an extension of his will. The first of his opponents was Neji Hyuga, the genius prodigy from the Hyuga clan. The boy's reputation preceded him, and it was clear that he thought little of Naruto's abilities. As they faced off, Neji's cocky smirk told Naruto everything he needed to know. This fight would be a test, not just of physical skill, but of mind. Neji's Byakugan flared to life, his gaze fixed on Naruto. "This is pointless," he said, his voice cold and dismissive. "You have no fate. You're just a tool, a weapon, nothing more. You're already outclassed." Naruto's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "We'll see about that," he said under his breath. From the moment the match began, Neji moved with speed and precision, his strikes aimed at Naruto's chakra points, each movement designed to cripple his opponent. But Naruto had trained under Mihawk, he had learned to read the flow of combat, to anticipate moves before they happened. And with Yoru, he wasn't just relying on his eyes or chakra alone. The blade responded to his will, shifting his style, combining precision with power in a way that was impossible for Neji to predict. As Neji advanced, Naruto dodged effortlessly, using his newfound control to weave between the Hyuga strikes, his movements fluid and purposeful. With each passing second, Naruto grew more confident, the blade in his hand becoming more than just a weapon, it was an extension of his spirit, guiding his every move. Neji struck again, his chakra-filled palm aimed straight for Naruto's chest. But Naruto was ready. He took a step to the side, Yoru flashing in the air as he redirected Neji's attack with a swift slash. The blade hummed with energy, its edge cutting through the air with precision that left Neji stunned. He had barely even seen the movement. Before Neji could react, Naruto followed up with a brutal swipe from Yoru, his chakra-infused strike leaving a deep cut across Neji's arm. The crowd gasped. Neji staggered back, his eyes wide with disbelief. You're not supposed to be this strong," Neji muttered, the arrogance fading from his voice. Naruto stood tall, his expression serious. "I'm not just some tool. I've trained for this moment." With his Byakugan still activated, Neji launched into a flurry of attacks, trying to overwhelm Naruto with speed and chakra control. But Naruto was ready. He knew that Neji's greatest strength lay in his ability to see chakra, to target vital points. So, he shifted his strategy, letting his chakra flow in unpredictable patterns, masking his movements and making it harder for Niji to read him. Every slash of Yoryu was calculated, every movement precise and measured, each strike bringing him closer to victory. Niji's confidence faltered as he struggled to land a blow on Naruto. Then, in a final moment of clarity, Naruto saw his opening. As Niji lunged forward, Naruto sidestepped and drove the tip of Yoryu straight into the ground, creating a shockwave of chakra that knocked Niji off balance. "Fate doesn't control me," Naruto said, his voice carrying over the arena. "I make my own path." With one final, swift strike, Naruto disarmed Niji, sending his sword flying through the air. The Hyuga prodigy collapsed to the ground, defeated and breathless, his Byakugan deactivated as he lay stunned by the sheer force of the attack. The audience was silent for a moment, before a roar of applause erupted. It was a victory that shattered Niji's belief in fate. In that moment, Naruto had proven that strength came from within, and no one, not even the greatest of prodigies, could predict or control his future. As Naruto walked off the battlefield, he felt the weight of his victory. It wasn't just about defeating Niji, it was about proving to himself that he was more than just the boy with the demon sealed inside him. He was someone to be respected. His heart swelled with pride, but also with a deep sense of responsibility. He had made it this far, but the real challenge was still ahead. The final match of the Chunin exams was against Gaara of the Sand, a name that sent chills through the hearts of the audience. Gaara's reputation as a ruthless and unpredictable shinobi had already spread across the village. His power was unparalleled, and his bloodlust was infamous. But Naruto wasn't intimidated. If anything, he welcomed the challenge. He had learned much under Mihawk's tutelage, and now he would test his strength against one of the most dangerous opponents he had ever faced. When the match began, Naruto immediately saw the difference. Gaara's presence was suffocating, his chakra more oppressive than anything Naruto had felt before. The air around Gaara seemed to shimmer with his power, and his eyes were cold, devoid of any trace of humanity. "You are in my way," Gaara said in a voice that sounded like the wind itself. "And I will crush anyone who dares to stand before me." Naruto's grip tightened around Yoryu. "Then try it." Without warning, Gaara raised his hand, and sand poured from his gourd, swirling around him in a massive, crushing wave. The sand moved like an extension of his own body, coiling around the battlefield and sweeping toward Naruto with terrifying speed. Naruto reacted instantly, leaping into the air and landing on a nearby pillar, his chakra flaring as he merged it with the blade. With one swift motion, he slashed at the sand, cutting through it effortlessly. The force of the blow sent shockwaves through the arena, causing the audience to gasp in amazement. Gaara's eyes narrowed. "So you can fight back," he hissed. Naruto grinned. "I don't go down that easily." Gaara's sand surged forward again, this time with even greater force, but Naruto was faster. He charged forward, using his chakra-enhanced speed to move faster than the sand could react. Yoryu flashed in the air, cutting through Gaara's defenses with devastating precision. Naruto's attacks were calculated, but also fueled by the raw power of the Nine Tails chakra, making each strike even more powerful. But Gaara was not to be outdone. He summoned more sand, wrapping it around his body like armor, before charging at Naruto with a speed that matched his own. The two collided in a clash of raw strength, chakra, and sand, the impact sending shockwaves throughout the arena. As the fight raged on, Naruto felt his strength beginning to waver. The Nine Tails chakra was powerful, but it wasn't infinite. Mihawk's teachings reminded him that in order to truly master Yoryu, he had to control not just his sword, but his own body and chakra. He had to push beyond his limits without losing control. And that's when he realized it, his true strength wasn't just in the blade or the chakra. It was in his heart, his resolve. He wouldn't lose. Not today. Naruto focused all his chakra into Yoryu, allowing the blade to absorb the energy. He spun, the blade a blur of motion as he slashed through Gaara's sand with an overwhelming force. The final blow shattered Gaara's defenses, sending him crashing to the ground, unable to move. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, the audience erupted into applause. Gaara, the once unstoppable force, had been defeated. Naruto stood tall, panting but victorious. As he looked down at Gaara, he saw something in the boy's eyes, something that had never been there before: respect. Naruto had earned it? In that moment, he knew that this was only the beginning. His journey was far from over. But for the first time, Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who had once been an outcast, had earned the respect of the shinobi world. He had proven that the strength of a swordsman was not just in his blade, but in his heart. And he was only getting started. The days following the Chunin exams were both a triumph and a burden. On one hand, Naruto had proved his strength, not just as a shinobi, but as a warrior in his own right. His victories over Neji and Gaara had earned him respect in the eyes of the villagers, respect that had once seemed impossible to achieve. Yet, despite the praise and recognition, the relationship between Naruto and the Hidden Leaf village remained fractured. The villagers, while no longer openly hostile, still regarded him with a mixture of awe and fear, as though his power was something that could not be fully understood or trusted. Whispers followed him wherever he went, and although he was no longer seen solely as the vessel of the Nine Tails, many still saw him as a potential threat. He could feel the distance, the walls people kept between him and them. "Naruto," the Hokage said, his voice somber as he summoned the young swordsman to his office. The Hokage's tired eyes studied him with a knowing gaze. "I've been watching you closely these past few weeks. Your abilities have grown exponentially. The things you did during the exams, those weren't the moves of a mere genin. I can't ignore that." Naruto's expression hardened. He knew where this was going. The Hokage sighed. "You've shown the potential to be more than anyone here could have imagined. But you must understand, Naruto, power like yours attracts attention both from those who would seek to control you and from enemies who might want to destroy you." Naruto clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had heard the warnings before, but this time, they carried more weight. The Hokage wasn't just speaking as a leader of the village, he was speaking as someone who had seen the dangers of unchecked power firsthand. "What are you trying to say, Hokage-sama?" "I'm telling you to be careful," the Hokage replied gently. "Your power is not something to be taken lightly. You must find balance. Strength should never overshadow the values that make you a shinobi." Naruto's gaze lowered. The weight of those words pressed down on him. He had trained tirelessly, pushing himself to the limits to be strong not just for himself, but for the village. But as his power grew, so too did the isolation he felt. It was as though the more he advanced, the more he became an outsider. As he left the Hokage's office, his mind remained clouded. But just as he was about to exit the building, he was stopped by a familiar presence. "Naruto." He turned to see Danzo standing in the doorway of a darkened room, his face as grim as ever. The scarred man's presence was unnerving, and his voice dripped with a quiet, calculating tone. "I've been watching you," Danzo continued, his one visible eye glinting with a dangerous intensity. "You've proven yourself to be a skilled fighter, but I believe you haven't yet realized your true potential. The village's future could depend on it." Naruto narrowed his eyes. He had never trusted Danzo, and the older man's cryptic words only served to raise suspicion. "What do you mean?" Danzo stepped forward, his gaze never wavering. "You've become a tool, Naruto, a weapon. And that weapon can be used for much greater purposes than simple missions or battles. The village needs someone like you, someone strong enough to ensure its survival in the face of growing threats. With your power, you could control this village, lead it into a new era." Naruto recoiled at the thought. He had spent too long being treated as a weapon, as a tool to be wielded by others. He didn't need Danzo or anyone else trying to control him. I'm not interested, he said, his voice cold and firm. Danzo's eye narrowed, a flicker of displeasure crossing his features. You will be, eventually. Strength like yours cannot go unrecognized. And when the time comes, you will see that we can offer you a place of power, one where you will never be looked down upon again. Naruto didn't respond. He didn't need to. He knew exactly what Danzo was offering, and it wasn't something he wanted. The only path he would walk was his own. Later that evening, Naruto found himself once again in the quiet of the training grounds, the soft moonlight casting shadows over the familiar landscape. The weight of the day's conversations lingered in his mind, each one a reminder of the tightrope he now walked. He had earned his strength, but with it came expectations, schemes, and the realization that his journey was far from over. As he unsheathed Yoru, its dark blade gleaming in the night, he felt a familiar presence beside him. It wasn't physical, no one stood there, but the voice that spoke to him was unmistakable. Naruto, Mihawk's voice echoed in his mind. I've been sensing your turmoil. The path you walk is not an easy one, but it is your path. Do not let others define it for you. Naruto gripped the sword tightly, his chest tightening with a mix of frustration and resolve. I don't want to be anyone's tool. But it feels like that's all anyone sees me as. The Hokage, Danzo, they just want to use me for their own purposes. Mihawk's voice was calm, steady. They will always try to use you, Naruto. That is the nature of power. But you must remember, power is not something to be wielded by others. It is something to be mastered by you, and used on your own terms. You are the one who decides who you are. Naruto looked down at Yoru, the sword gleaming with the faintest trace of moonlight. He had come so far, he couldn't let his path be controlled now. You have learned much already, Mihawk continued. But your true journey is just beginning. The way of the sword and the way of the shinobi are not mutually exclusive. If you wish to protect those you care about, you must blend the two. A swordsman's power comes not only from the blade, but from the heart and mind that guide it. Naruto nodded, feeling a spark of clarity. I'll protect my friends. And I'll protect the village, too, on my terms. Mihawk's voice softened, a note of approval in his words. Good. But remember, Naruto, power is not an end. It is a means to an end. The true test of a shinobi is not in how strong they are, but in how they use their strength. Keep your heart pure and your resolve unwavering, and you will be unstoppable. Naruto stood silently for a moment, letting the words sink in. The way of the sword had become his way, but it wasn't just about strength. It was about determination. It was about choosing to fight, not for control or dominance, but for something greater. For those who had stood by him when no one else would. As the night grew colder, Naruto sheathed Yoru, his heart filled with resolve. The journey ahead would be difficult, and the path would be fraught with challenges. But he had come this far, and he wasn't about to stop now. He wasn't just Naruto Uzumaki, the boy with the 9 tails sealed inside him. He was a swordsman. He was a warrior. And he would carve his own future, one swing of Yoru at a time. The village might have feared him. They might have doubted him. But that didn't matter anymore. He knew who he was, and he knew what he stood for. And no one would ever look down on him again. Naruto stood on the edge of the training grounds, the wind ruffling his hair as he stared out over the hidden leaf village. The events of the Chunin exams felt like a distant memory, even though they had only happened a few weeks ago. He had proven himself defeating Neji, Gaara, and everyone who had doubted him, but the aftermath of those victories was far more complicated than he had imagined. The village had changed in subtle ways. The whispers behind his back were no longer full of disdain or hatred, now they were filled with a mix of fear and admiration. He was no longer the isolated pariah of Konoha, now, he was a force to be reckoned with. But that newfound respect came at a cost. He was a weapon, a living reminder of the power that coursed through his veins, and the more powerful he became, the more dangerous the world around him grew. Orochimaru had been watching him closely ever since the Chunin exams. The snake-like rogue ninja, ever hungry for power, had been intrigued by Yoru's destructive potential. The sword was unlike anything he had ever encountered, and the thought of adding it to his arsenal had sent a dangerous thrill through his veins. Orochimaru knew that the blade could serve as a key to unlocking even greater strength, and his obsession with acquiring it had only deepened in recent weeks. Danzo, too, had begun to make his presence known more aggressively. Despite his subtlety, his intentions were clear. Naruto was a tool, a weapon that could be controlled, used to further his own ambitions. The root leader had been watching Naruto's every move, plotting and scheming, waiting for the right moment to make his move. The Hidden Leaf Village was no longer a safe haven for Naruto. He was becoming too powerful, and those in positions of authority were starting to take notice. Naruto, however, was blissfully unaware of the political turmoil that swirled around him. His focus remained on his training, on growing stronger, on mastering his blade and learning the secrets that Mihawk had passed down to him. But as he trained, he could feel the weight of the world pressing down on him. The beginning of advanced training. It had been some time since Mihawk's spirit had first guided him through the basics of swordsmanship, and Naruto had already surpassed many of his initial limitations. Now, Mihawk was teaching him more advanced techniques, long-range slashes, counterattacks, and the subtle art of anticipation. The blade, Yoru, was no longer just a weapon to Naruto. It had become an extension of his body, a part of him. And Mihawk's teachings were helping him unlock its true potential. "You've improved, Naruto," Mihawk's voice echoed in his mind one evening as Naruto practiced his swings, cutting through the air with incredible precision. "But there is still much for you to learn. The art of swordsmanship is not just about power, it is about control. And control requires focus." Naruto gritted his teeth, sweat trickling down his forehead as he adjusted his stance. His muscles ached, but he refused to stop. He had to push himself harder. He wasn't the same boy who had first picked up Yoru, but he knew that he could be more. He had to be more. "I'm ready, Mihawk," Naruto said, determination in his voice. "What do I need to do?" "Patience is key," Mihawk's voice replied, calm and steady. "The next step in your training is learning to anticipate the movements of your opponents. True swordsmanship is not about attacking first, it is about knowing when and how to strike. You must become attuned to the flow of battle." Naruto took a deep breath and steadied his grip on Yoru. He had learned how to read the rhythm of a fight, but Mihawk's words gave him a new sense of purpose. He wasn't just fighting to win anymore. He was learning to outthink his opponents, to control the battlefield. He had always relied on his chaotic energy, but Mihawk was teaching him to channel it into something more refined. The blade sang through the air as Naruto executed a series of fluid strikes, each one faster and more precise than the last. The wind seemed to bend around him, his chakra-infused movements blending seamlessly with the sword's weight. It felt as though he was one with the blade, and as the last slash cut through the air, Mihawk's voice rang in his mind again. "You are beginning to understand." Naruto's heart raced, but it wasn't from exhaustion. It was from the exhilaration of mastering something new. He felt the flow of chakra in his body, his connection to the sword deepening. And with that connection, something else began to awaken within him, a sense of heightened awareness, a sharpness in his senses that he had never experienced before. The emergence of observation haki and sage mode fusion. As Naruto continued to refine his swordsmanship, something strange began to happen. The more he focused on his training, the more attuned he became to the world around him. His instincts sharpened, and he started to notice things he hadn't before: the flutter of a leaf in the wind, the subtle shifts in the air around him, the faintest sounds in the distance. It was as though his senses had been heightened to an extraordinary degree. "Mihawk," Naruto asked during one of their training sessions, What's happening to me? I can feel everything around me. It's like I can see through the movements before they even happen. That is the next step, Naruto, Mihawk explained. What you are experiencing is the merging of your chakra with the power of observation. It is known as observation haki, a technique used by those who have mastered the art of perception. You are beginning to see the world in a way that no one else can. But there is more. When combined with Sage Mode, your awareness will become nearly perfect. You will be able to read your opponent's moves before they even think them. Naruto's eyes widened. He had heard of Sage Mode before, but he had never considered combining it with his blade. Wait, so you're telling me I can use Sage Mode and this observation haki thing together? Mihawk's voice was calm, but there was a note of approval in his words. Yes. The fusion of your heightened senses from Sage Mode with the ability to anticipate your opponent's movements will make you nearly untouchable. It will allow you to outmaneuver even the most skilled adversaries. Naruto stood still for a moment, absorbing the weight of Mihawk's words. He had always been someone who fought with instinct, with raw power. But this was different. This was about control. This was about becoming the ultimate swordsman, someone who could defeat any opponent with precision and strategy. Naruto closed his eyes and focused. The world around him seemed to slow, his senses sharp as a blade. He could feel the air currents, hear the faintest rustling of leaves, and see every small shift in the environment. It was as if the entire battlefield had become his canvas, and he was the artist, poised to strike at the perfect moment. When he opened his eyes, the world seemed brighter, clearer. His senses had expanded, and his connection to Yoru had deepened even further. He could feel the blade's weight more acutely, its movements more fluid, as if it, too, had become part of his enhanced awareness. I can see it, Naruto muttered to himself, a grin spreading across his face. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was controlling the flow of battle, anticipating his opponent's every move before they even made it. The growing threat. Unbeknownst to Naruto, his newfound abilities had caught the attention of those who coveted power. Orochimaru had been watching him from the shadows, sending spies to gather information on his progress. The rogue ninja had already begun scheming to acquire Yoru for himself. His obsession with power was only growing, and the prospect of gaining the blade and the strength it could offer was too tempting for him to resist. At the same time, Danzo's influence within the village was growing stronger. He had long desired to bring Naruto under Root's control, seeing the young man's power as a tool to be used for the village's benefit and for his own personal ambitions. His efforts had become more subtle, more insidious. He knew that Naruto wouldn't simply fall in line. But with each passing day, the pressure grew. Naruto, however, was blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing around him. His focus remained on his training, on mastering his abilities, and on becoming the shinobi he had always dreamed of being. But the danger was real, and the longer he remained ignorant of the forces at work, the closer they came to ensnaring him. The path Naruto walked was becoming more complicated, and he would soon find himself forced to confront the shadows in the dark. In the weeks that followed, Naruto's power continued to grow, and so did the dangers surrounding him. But with every challenge, Mihawk's teachings guided him forward, sharpening his mind and his blade. And though the village around him was changing, Naruto remained determined to carve his own path no matter the cost. The sun was beginning to set on the Hidden Leaf village, casting an orange glow over the training grounds where Team 7 usually gathered. It was a peaceful scene, one that belied the storm brewing within the hearts of its members. Naruto stood with Yoru in hand, feeling the weight of the sword's presence. The blade had become more than just a tool for him, it was a symbol of his growth, a reflection of his journey, and his connection to Mihawk's teachings. But the harmony of the moment was fleeting, and Naruto could sense it. There was a change in the air. Something was shifting between him and Sasuke. He hadn't wanted to admit it, but it was becoming clearer with each passing day. Sasuke was no longer the teammate he once had been, and Naruto wasn't sure if that was his fault or Sasuke's. Naruto was aware of Sasuke's eyes on him as he practiced. The young Uchiha had been distant, his usual quiet demeanor now laced with tension. He wasn't like he used to be, more withdrawn than ever before, and Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that something was eating away at him. Their bond had been strained, fraying at the edges as Naruto's power continued to grow. What had once been a rivalry had turned into something more personal, something unspoken but palpable. "Hey, Sasuke," Naruto called out, sheathing Yuri with a quiet swish of steel. "You been quiet lately. Something on your mind?" Sasuke's response was as cold as ever. "Don't act like you care, Naruto." Naruto blinked, taken aback by the sharpness of Sasuke's tone. It wasn't unusual for Sasuke to keep his emotions in check, but this was different. Sasuke's usual indifference had been replaced by something darker, more intense. It was like a pressure building up inside him, one that was finally reaching a breaking point. "I'm not playing games here," Sasuke continued, his gaze unwavering. "You've changed. You've gotten too strong. Too fast. It's like you think you're better than me now." Naruto's brow furrowed. "What?" "Sasuke, I don't think I'm better than you. I just what?" Sasuke snapped, his hand clenching into a fist. "You think just because you have that damn sword and all these new powers, you're some kind of unbeatable monster? I'm not going to let you outshine me, Naruto. Not again." There was a sharpness in Sasuke's voice that Naruto hadn't heard before. His rival's words carried a weight of jealousy, of a deep insecurity that Naruto had never fully understood until now. Sasuke's thirst for power had always been rooted in something personal, in the need to avenge his clan, but this felt different. It wasn't just about vengeance anymore, it was about proving that he was still worthy of respect. It was about being the strongest no matter the cost. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He wasn't sure what had changed, but he knew this wasn't just another sparring match anymore. This was something deeper. Something that had been festering for a long time, hidden beneath the surface of their rivalry. And Sasuke's anger wasn't going to disappear easily. "You want to fight me, Sasuke?" Naruto asked, his voice steady despite the intensity of the situation. "Fine. But I'm not holding back." Sasuke's Sharingan flared to life as he glared at Naruto. "I wouldn't expect anything less from you." Naruto's heart pounded in his chest. He had never seen Sasuke this angry, this desperate. His Sharingan eyes locked onto Naruto, reading his movements with near-perfect precision. Sasuke's whole body seemed to tense, every muscle primed for action. He was ready to fight, ready to prove that he was still the stronger of the two. But Naruto had changed, too. His training under Mihawk had transformed him in ways he couldn't have anticipated. The blade was no longer just an extension of his will, it had become a part of him, a reflection of the path he was walking. And with the power of observation haki now at his disposal, Naruto felt the battle before it even began. The air seemed to grow still as Sasuke lunged at him, his movements sharp and fast, a blur of speed and precision. But Naruto was ready. He could see it all, the trajectory of Sasuke's strike, the way his chakra flared with every movement. He had trained for this moment, and now it was time to put everything he had learned to the test. Naruto stepped aside, his body moving with a fluidity that matched the rhythm of the fight. He deflected Sasuke's first strike with a simple twist of Yoru, the blade singing through the air as it met Sasuke's kunai with a metallic clash. Naruto could feel the power of the Sharingan as it tried to anticipate his next move, but he was already one step ahead. His strikes were calculated, measured, not wild or chaotic, but precise. The battle between them escalated quickly, a blur of steel and chakra as each attempted to outmaneuver the other. Sasuke's Sharingan tracked Naruto's every move, but Naruto's heightened senses allowed him to stay one step ahead. Every time Sasuke aimed for a vulnerable spot, Naruto was there, his blade cutting through the air with calculated precision, leaving Sasuke no room to land a decisive blow. Sasuke's frustration grew with every failed attack, his Sharingan spinning wildly as he pushed himself harder. "Why won't you fall, Naruto?" he roared, desperation leaking into his voice. "You should be weaker than me. You should be nothing." Naruto's gaze softened as he sidestepped another vicious slash. He wasn't fighting to hurt Sasuke. He wasn't fighting to prove he was better. But Sasuke was lost in his own rage, unable to see past his own desire for dominance. "You're wrong, Sasuke," Naruto said quietly, his voice cutting through the noise of the battle. "Strength isn't just about power. It's about knowing when to fight and when to stop." For a brief moment, Sasuke hesitated. The words struck deep, but it was only for a fraction of a second. Then, with a roar, Sasuke charged again, faster than before, his Sharingan flaring with the intensity of his emotions. But Naruto was ready. With a swift movement, he used a combination of haki and his blade to block Sasuke's strike, sending him skidding backward. The force of the impact was enough to knock Sasuke off balance, but Naruto didn't follow through. He could have struck, could have defeated him in that moment, but he held back. He couldn't bring himself to harm his friend, no matter how far apart they had become. Sasuke, breathing heavily, stared at him with wide eyes, disbelief written across his face. "Why didn't you finish it?" Naruto took a deep breath, lowering his blade. "Because I don't want to destroy you, Sasuke. We're not enemies. Not yet." But Sasuke wasn't listening. His eyes burned with frustration and pride, and the seeds of something darker were beginning to sprout in his heart. He turned away, his shoulders tense, the weight of his inner conflict pressing down on him. "You don't get it," Sasuke muttered. "You never did." And with that, Sasuke disappeared into the shadows, leaving Naruto standing alone on the training grounds, his heart heavy with the unspoken words between them. The aftermath. As Naruto watched Sasuke retreat into the distance, a deep sense of unease settled in his chest. He had held back, shown restraint, but it hadn't been enough. The rift between them was widening, and no matter how hard he tried, Naruto couldn't bridge the gap. Sasuke's frustration was palpable, his jealousy evident in every clash, every word. But Naruto had hoped, deep down, that they could still find a way back to the friendship they once shared. He had hoped that they could still be a team, fighting side by side. But now, as he stood there, the weight of the moment sinking in, Naruto knew that things could never go back to the way they were. Sasuke was slipping further away, pulled by his own darkness, and Naruto could do little but watch as the bond between them continued to unravel. Strength wasn't just about power. It was about understanding when to fight and when to walk away. And for Naruto, that meant stepping back and letting Sasuke find his own path, even if it led them in different directions. But deep down, Naruto knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a much darker journey, one that would test their friendship in ways neither of them could have ever imagined. The days following the intense clash with Sasuke weighed heavily on Naruto's heart. He had hoped that his words would reach his friend, that somehow, they could avoid the inevitable path that seemed to be unfolding between them. But Sasuke had left without a word, and the distance between them seemed to grow with each passing day. Naruto couldn't help but feel the sting of that separation, but he knew, deep down, that the journey he was on was far bigger than his fractured relationships. His focus needed to remain on his training, on growing stronger. He had a new power to wield, a new destiny to shape. Mihawk had been unusually silent since the battle with Sasuke, but Naruto could feel his presence, guiding him, always just out of sight. The sword, Yoru, was a constant reminder of the path he had chosen. It wasn't just a weapon anymore, it was a part of him. The blade had become an extension of his will, a companion in his journey. But now, There was something more that Naruto needed to understand about yours, something Mihawk had yet to reveal. Naruto stood alone in the training grounds, his eyes fixed on the massive black blade resting against the stone beside him. He reached out, running his fingers along the hilt, the familiar weight and cool surface of Yora grounding him. Mihawk's voice, soft and steady, echoed in his mind. You've come far, Naruto. But there is more to this blade than you realize. It is not just a tool for battle. It is a living entity, bound to you. A bond that will strengthen with you if you have the will to keep it. Naruto's brow furrowed as he lifted the blade, the weight in his hands heavier than ever before. He could feel the blade responding to him, as if it were aware of his thoughts, his emotions. The bond between them wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something spiritual. Mihawk's voice continued, more serious now. Yori will grow with you, but it will not give you its strength freely. It will test you. If your heart falters, if you lose your resolve, Yori will turn away from you, leaving you powerless. Do not take this lightly. The words struck Naruto hard. Losing the bond with Yori wasn't just a matter of losing power, it would be like losing a part of himself. The sword had become his most trusted ally, the symbol of his growth, and the thought of being cast aside by it sent a chill down his spine. Taking a deep breath, Naruto closed his eyes and steadied his thoughts. I'm not going to fail. Not this time. He set his focus on the blade once more, feeling the hum of its energy, its potential. There was a way to strengthen the bond, to ensure that it remained unbreakable. It wasn't just about physical strength, it was about balance. Naruto had spent years suppressing his emotions, fighting against the world, but now, he needed to accept them, to embrace them as part of himself. Only then could he truly master the blade. The wind picked up around him, rustling the leaves of the trees as Naruto sank into a deep meditation. He closed his eyes, clearing his mind, focusing on the steady rhythm of his breath. As his mind quieted, he felt his chakras stirring within him. He began to focus on it, guiding it, weaving it around the sword, connecting the flow of his energy to the pulse of Yoru. Time seemed to stretch as Naruto sat in silence, his awareness expanding. The bond between him and the blade grew stronger with each breath, each thought. He could feel Yoru's essence, its weight, its power, its history. It wasn't just a weapon forged from steel, it was a piece of Mihawk's legacy, a blade that had witnessed countless battles, countless victories, and countless failures. The blade had seen it all, and it would only accept a wielder worthy of its strength. As Naruto meditated, his connection to the blade deepened. He felt the sword respond to his emotions, to his resolve, as if testing him. He could sense a pressure building in the air, a pulse of energy radiating from the blade. The longer he focused, the stronger the connection became. He was beginning to understand Yoru in ways he never had before. But Mihawk's warning echoed in his mind, if your heart falters. Naruto's heart steadied. He knew that this was the moment he had been waiting for. He could not allow himself to doubt, to second guess. This was his path, and he had to walk it with confidence. With a sudden surge of chakra, Naruto allowed his energy to flow into the blade, combining it with the essence of Yoru. The power surged through his veins, filling him with a sense of clarity, of purpose. He could feel the chakra fusing with the blade's energy, creating something entirely new. The connection was complete. In that moment, he felt the first stirrings of new abilities awaken within him. His chakra, once limited to his traditional ninjutsu, now flowed freely through the blade. He could feel it in the air, the power vibrating around him. Chakra-reinforced strikes, Naruto muttered, focusing on the flow of wind and fire chakra. He swung Yoru in a wide arc, and a gust of wind accompanied the blade's movement, the air crackling with energy. The blade cut through the air, leaving a trail of fiery chakra in its wake. The slash wasn't just a simple attack, it was a fusion of elements, an overwhelming wave of power that sent a shockwave through the ground beneath his feet. Naruto grinned, the thrill of new power surging within him. This was just the beginning. He could feel that Yoru's potential was far from fully realized, and so was his own. Next, Naruto focused on a different technique, something Mihawk had mentioned in passing, Haki-enhanced pressure waves. The name had intrigued him, but he hadn't fully understood the concept until now. Haki was something Mihawk had spoken about often, and though Naruto had learned the basics of it, this was different. This was about creating powerful, long-range attacks using his newfound mastery of observation Haki and chakra. Naruto closed his eyes and concentrated, feeling the pulse of energy within him. As he focused, he directed the flow of chakra into Yoru, guiding the blade as if it were an extension of his very soul. With a swift motion, he struck the air with the edge of the blade, unleashing a massive wave of force. The ground beneath him trembled as the shockwave shot forward, tearing through the earth and leaving deep craters in its wake. The power was incredible. The impact of the attack was enough to level the surrounding trees, the force of the wave stretching out over hundreds of meters. Naruto stood, breathing heavily, the exhilaration of the new ability still coursing through his veins. Mihawk's voice resonated in his mind again. Well done, Naruto. You've taken your first step toward mastering the true power of the blade. But remember, strength is not just about power, it is about control. Never forget that. Naruto nodded to himself, wiping the sweat from his brow. He knew Mihawk was right. This power, this strength, was his to wield, but he had to be careful not to let it consume him. Yoru had already shown him that it was as much a test of his heart as it was of his skill. As the sun began to set, Naruto stood alone on the training field, his heart filled with a sense of accomplishment. The bond between him and Yoru had deepened, and with it, his strength had grown. But there was still so much more to learn, so much more to master. Naruto wasn't just a shinobi anymore. He was a swordsman, a warrior, and his journey had only just begun. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dense forest that surrounded Konoha. Naruto and his team were on a routine mission, escorting a small convoy of merchants back to the village. It was a quiet day, too quiet. Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The breeze was unusually still, and the chirping of the birds had died down. Sasuke and Sakura walked ahead of him, deep in conversation, but Naruto's eyes were constantly scanning the surroundings. He could feel the tension building in the air, like the calm before a storm. His hand rested on the hilt of Yoru, the massive blade always by his side, his trusted companion. He was ready. He had to be. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The trees rustled in the distance, and a strange, menacing presence filled the air. Naruto's instincts flared, and he immediately dropped into a defensive stance, eyes narrowing as he searched the woods. "We're not alone," Naruto muttered under his breath. Before anyone could respond, figures cloaked in dark robes emerged from the trees, their presence unmistakable. Sound ninja. But there was one figure among them that made Naruto's blood run cold: Orochimaru, the infamous Sannin. His pale face twisted into a cruel smile as he stepped forward, his gaze falling directly on Naruto and the massive sword strapped to his back. "Ah, the little demon wields the great Mihawk's sword," Orochimaru hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "Such power in the hands of a mere child. It's a waste. That blade belongs to one who can truly appreciate its potential. I think it's time you let me take it from you." Naruto's grip tightened on Yoru's hilt, and his heart pounded in his chest. He knew Orochimaru was dangerous, far more dangerous than anything he'd faced before. But there was no hesitation. His strength had grown, and he wouldn't back down. "Not now. Orochimaru," Naruto's voice was low, but filled with resolve. "You'll have to pry it from my cold, dead hands." Orochimaru chuckled darkly, his eyes narrowing in amusement. "Such fire. But fire alone won't be enough to stop me." Without warning, Orochimaru lunged forward, his snake-like body twisting unnaturally as he struck with lethal precision. Naruto's mind sharpened, his senses heightened by his mastery of observation haki. He could see it coming, the subtle shifts in Orochimaru's posture, the way his body coiled before each strike. In that split second, Naruto's body moved instinctively. He sidestepped Orochimaru's initial strike, the snake-like limb missing him by inches. The Sunin's attacks were swift, but they lacked the precision that Naruto had learned to anticipate. "You're too slow," Naruto said coldly, swinging Yori with practiced ease. The blade cleaved the air, sending a shockwave of wind at Orochimaru. But the Sunin was quick, his serpentine movements allowing him to narrowly avoid the brunt of the attack. He retaliated, launching a barrage of snakes from his sleeves, each one aimed at Naruto's body. Naruto's eyes flashed with intensity. With a single, swift motion, he swung Yoru again, the blade cutting through the snakes as if they were mere paper. The precision of his strikes was astounding, each slash landing with deadly accuracy. Orochimaru's snakes were nothing more than fodder in the face of Yoru's overwhelming power. But the Sunin was far from finished. He leaped back, creating distance between them, and his eyes glowed with malice. "Impressive. But let's see how you handle this." Orochimaru's hands moved in a complex series of seals, and with a hiss, he summoned a massive serpent from the ground. The creature's scales shimmered as it reared back, ready to strike. The monstrous snake lunged at Naruto, its jaws wide open, fangs gleaming. Naruto's heart raced, but he was calm. His mastery of observation haki allowed him to predict the snake's movement before it even began to strike. With the precise twist of his wrist, Yoru cut through the air, the blade imbued with chakra. A whirlwind of wind and fire exploded from the blade as it collided with the snake, splitting it down the middle. "Not bad," Naruto muttered, sweat trickling down his forehead. His chakra reserves were deep, but he knew this fight was far from over. Orochimaru's lips twisted into a sinister grin as he watched the snake fall. "You're stronger than I thought. But that will not be enough." In a flash, Orochimaru appeared behind Naruto, his long fingers curling around a hilt of Akuno. With a vicious swipe, he aimed for Naruto's neck. But Naruto's senses flared once again. He could feel the pressure in the air as Orochimaru's hand moved toward him. Naruto's eyes snapped open, and he activated his Conqueror's haki. A wave of raw, uncontrollable energy burst forth from him, rippling through the air like a shock wave. The sound ninja who had been circling around him froze, their bodies momentarily paralyzed by the overwhelming force. They staggered, their eyes wide with fear, as Naruto's presence overpowered them. Orochimaru, however, was unfazed. His face twisted in mock amusement as he watched the effects of Naruto's power. "Impressive, little boy. But I face stronger than you." Naruto glared at him, feeling the pulse of haki within him, the strength he had cultivated over countless hours of training. His grip on Yoru tightened, and with a flick of his wrist, he released a devastating strike toward Orochimaru. But just as the blade was about to make contact, Orochimaru's body blurred, and with a sickening sound, he shifted into a mass of snakes, escaping the attack. Naruto's attack hit nothing but air, and in an instant, the Sunin reappeared, standing a few feet away, unharmed. Orochimaru let out a long, mocking laugh. "You're quite the challenge, Naruto. But you cannot defeat me with just your sword. I will claim Yoru, and I will make you regret ever standing in my way." Naruto's gaze hardened. The battle had been fierce, but he wasn't done. He could feel the burn of his chakra reserves, the strain on his body, but the fire within him wouldn't extinguish. Orochimaru had underestimated him. And now, he would pay the price. "I don't think you understand, Orochimaru," Naruto said, his voice steady. "I won't be the one regretting this." The moment of hesitation was enough for Naruto to close the distance between them. With a series of swift, calculated strikes, Naruto forced Orochimaru to retreat further, his movements too fast, too precise for the Sunin to follow. Finally, with a final slash, Naruto managed to land a deep cut across Orochimaru's side. The Sunin hissed in pain, his face contorted in rage. But before Naruto could follow through with another attack, Orochimaru's form shifted once again, and he vanished in a blur of snakes, leaving only a faint, sinister laugh behind. "You're strong, Naruto," Orochimaru's voice echoed, distant but clear. "But I'll be back for that blade. And when I return, you won't be so lucky." Naruto stood tall, his chest heaving with exhaustion, his grip still tight on Yoru. The battle was over for now, but he knew that this was just the beginning. Orochimaru would return, and next time, Naruto would be ready. The air in Konoha's council chambers was thick with tension. The room, normally a place for diplomatic discussion, now buzzed with anxious voices. The aftermath of Naruto's clash with Orochimaru had shaken the village, and the council knew that the power Naruto wielded could either be the village's greatest asset or its greatest threat. Eyes were fixed on the Hokage, who sat at the head of the table, his fingers steepled in front of his face. Danzo stood to the side, his cold, calculating gaze fixed on Naruto, who sat with his arms crossed, a scowl etched onto his face. The young shinobi could feel the weight of their gazes, the suspicion, the fear. It was as if the entire village was looking at him through a new lens, one that saw him not as a protector of Konoha, but as a potential weapon to be controlled. "That sword," Danzo's voice was sharp and commanding, his gaze never leaving Naruto, "is far too dangerous in the hands of a child. It's a weapon of mass destruction, and we cannot afford to let it remain out of control." Naruto's grip tightened on the hilt of Yoru, his fingers itching to drop it. But he didn't. Not yet. He knew that drawing his blade in the presence of the council could lead to further complications. The last thing he wanted was to be seen as a threat. "The boy has proven himself capable," the Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, spoke up, his voice calm yet firm. "He saved Konoha from danger, and his power is not something to be feared, but to be harnessed for the village's benefit." "Harnessed?" Danzo spat, his tone dripping with disdain. "The boy is a loose cannon, Hokage. Do you not see the danger he poses? He walks around with Mihawk's sword. Do you know what that means? The very blade that has slaughtered countless warriors, the sword that holds the essence of a legend. He is no longer just a ninja, he is a weapon, and I will not stand idly by while Konoha risks everything by allowing him free rein." "You would have him under your thumb, as always," the Hokage replied, his voice tinged with weariness. "Naruto is not just a tool, Danzo. He is a member of this village, and it is our duty to protect him as much as he protects us." Danzo's gaze hardened, and he leaned forward slightly, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the edge of the table. "What will happen when Orochimaru comes again? Or worse, when other forces take notice of this boy's power? He will be a target, and without proper guidance, without supervision, he could very well bring about the downfall of this village." Naruto stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a loud noise. The conversation had reached a boiling point, and he couldn't take it anymore. "So, what? You think I'm just some pawn for you to control?" he snapped, his voice tinged with frustration. "You think I'm not aware of what this sword means? Of what I've become? I know what you're thinking, Danzo. You think I'm just a weapon, something you can use when it suits you." The room fell silent as everyone turned their attention to Naruto, his outburst cutting through the tension like a blade. For a moment, all that could be heard was the sound of Naruto's breath, heavy and labored with the emotion building inside him. His fist clenched around the hilt of Yoru as he stared down the council members, his eyes burning with the need to be understood. "I'm not just a weapon," Naruto continued, his voice quieter but no less fierce. "I'm more than that. I've worked my ass off to get this strong. I fought, I bled, and I've done things you can't even imagine to get here. And you're telling me it's all for nothing, that it's all just a tool for your use? I won't stand for that. The Hokage looked at Naruto, a sad smile on his face. Naruto, I understand your frustration. But you must understand that Danzo is not wrong in his concerns. The power you wield is enormous, and there are forces in the world who would stop at nothing to claim it. Naruto's chest tightened. He had heard these words before, but they stung more than ever now. He didn't want to be seen as a weapon, not anymore. But it seemed like that was all they ever saw him as. A tool to be used. A pawn in their endless game. Mihawk's voice echoed in his mind, cutting through the noise of the council chamber. A true swordsman doesn't seek validation from others. Your worth lies in your actions, not their approval. Naruto exhaled slowly, his anger simmering down as Mihawk's words began to sink in. The tension in his shoulders loosened, and he relaxed his grip on Yoru, though his gaze remained hard. He wasn't going to let them control him. Not anymore. I don't need your approval, Naruto said, his voice steady but firm. I've made my choices, and I'll live with them. But don't ever think for a second that I'll let you dictate who I am or what I do. I'm not a weapon. I'm a person. And I'll prove that to you, no matter what it takes. Danzo's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. The Hokage's gaze softened, and he looked at Naruto with a hint of understanding. We will need to have further discussions on this matter. But for now, Naruto, I ask you to trust us. Naruto didn't answer immediately. He stood there for a moment, his chest still heaving, before he finally turned and walked toward the door. He didn't look back as he left the council chamber, his heart heavy with the weight of everything that had been said. Outside the room, Naruto leaned against the wall, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. He didn't know what the future held, or if the village would ever accept him for who he truly was. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going to let anyone control his fate. He was going to forge his own path, and no matter what, he would never again be just a weapon. As the door to the council chamber closed behind him, Naruto's thoughts were interrupted by a voice, calm and steady, yet filled with a sense of authority that only Mihawk could impart. You did well, Mihawk said, appearing at Naruto's side. You stood your ground. But remember, words are just that, words. Actions are what matter. Naruto looked up at the swordsman, his face still hard with resolve, but a flicker of something determination, perhaps burned in his eyes. I won't let them control me, Mihawk. I'll prove them wrong. I'll show them that I'm more than just a weapon. Mihawk nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. I have no doubt. But you must remember, the path of a swordsman is not one that is easily walked. You must be prepared to stand alone, even when those you care about turn their backs. Naruto nodded. He understood. The journey ahead was going to be difficult, but he wasn't afraid anymore. He had found his resolve, and that was all he needed. As he turned to leave, he couldn't help but feel a sense of clarity. The village, the council, they could think what they wanted. But he wasn't their puppet. He was his own man. And he would show them all that his worth was not defined by their approval, but by the strength he carried within himself. The village of Konoha, once a place of solace, now felt like a cage. The wall seemed to close in on Naruto with every passing day, the pressure of expectations weighing him down. The tension from the council confrontation still lingered in his mind, but it was a new, more personal threat that now gnawed at him. Sasuke. Naruto could feel the shift in the air. Sasuke had become more distant, more closed off. The once fiery rivalry between them was slowly being replaced with something darker, something more dangerous. Naruto tried to reach out, to bridge the growing gap between them, but Sasuke remained unreachable, his eyes filled with a coldness that seemed to reject everything and everyone. It was during one of their training sessions that Naruto first noticed the subtle changes. Sasuke's movements were sharper, faster, almost as if he were holding something back, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Their sparring session grew more intense as Sasuke's anger flared, and Naruto's frustration grew. He could see it now, the jealousy, the hunger for power. Sasuke was slipping. And it was Orochimaru who was pulling him in. It started as a whisper, an invitation to something greater, a promise of unimaginable power. Orochimaru's voice, soft yet filled with an enticing promise, reached Sasuke's ears like a song of temptation. The power to surpass Naruto, to become stronger than anyone else, it was everything Sasuke had ever wanted. The promise of vengeance, the promise of a new path, all wrapped in the allure of power beyond comprehension. Sasuke found himself drawn to the darkness, a place where he could no longer hear the voices of his past, the pain of loss, or the crushing weight of his family's legacy. Orochimaru offered him a chance to free himself from the shackles that bound him to Konoha and to his own heart. All he had to do was give in. Naruto, oblivious to the growing darkness within his friend, continued to train with Mihawk, trying to perfect his swordsmanship, trying to push himself further than ever before. But deep down, he could feel the shift in their dynamic. The absence of Sasuke's usual rivalry left a bitter taste in his mouth, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. One day, Naruto arrived at the training grounds early, eager to work on a new technique Mihawk had promised him, the sky-cutting slash. It was a move so powerful that Mihawk had warned him not to use it lightly. It required perfect focus, an understanding of both his sword and his chakra, and an unwavering will. Mihawk had said the technique could split the heavens, a feat so ambitious that it seemed more myth than reality. But if there was anyone capable of mastering it, it was Naruto. However, as he arrived, he found not Mihawk waiting for him, but a message. It was short, direct, and unmistakable. Sasuke has left the village. Naruto stood frozen, the words on the paper blurring before his eyes. Sasuke, his teammate, his rival, the one person who had always been by his side in some capacity, had left Konoha. Gone. To seek the power Orochimaru had promised him. The anger that flared in Naruto's chest was familiar, but it felt different this time. This was betrayal. This wasn't the rivalry he had come to expect from Sasuke. This was something much deeper, more dangerous. A part of him wanted to chase after Sasuke immediately, to bring him back, to demand answers. But Naruto knew better than that. This wasn't about bringing Sasuke back for the sake of Team 7. This was about saving him from himself. If Sasuke truly wanted to walk this dark path, Naruto wouldn't follow. But he wouldn't let him fall without a fight. That evening, Mihawk found Naruto sitting alone by the training grounds, his face shadowed with anger and uncertainty. "You're angry," Mihawk observed, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of warning. "But don't let that anger control you, Naruto. Anger can cloud judgment, and you can't afford to lose your clarity now. Sasuke has made his choice. It is not your responsibility to carry the weight of his path." Naruto clenched his fists, struggling to keep his emotions in check. "He's my friend, Mihawk. I can't just let him go down that road. I won't let him throw everything away for some false promise of power." Mihawk's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "You are right to care for him, but you cannot make Sasuke walk the path you want for him. He must choose his own way, just as you chose yours. All you can do now is ensure you walk your own path with purpose. And you must remember, Naruto, sometimes, the sword is not just a tool for battle. It is a tool for understanding. Use it to find clarity in this moment." Mihawk paused for a moment, then handed Naruto something that felt heavier than it appeared. "This is the sky-cutting slash. It is yours now. It is a technique forged in the silence of your will. When you use it, think not of Sasuke, not of what he has done, but of your own purpose. Your path, Naruto. It is not to save others from their choices. It is to walk your own and protect what is yours." Naruto stared at the sword, his hand instinctively brushing against the hilt of Yoru. I don't want to lose him. He's all I've got, Mihawk. You won't lose him, Mihawk said quietly. But if you let your emotions cloud your judgment, you will lose yourself. The next day, Naruto set out with Team 7 now with the added mission to bring Sasuke back. Kakashi, Sakura, and Naruto found themselves united once again, though the air was heavy with the unspoken knowledge that this mission was not just about saving a teammate. It was about stopping someone they once called a friend from falling into a darkness they might never escape. Sasuke's departure had set into motion a series of events that would not only affect Konoha but the entire shinobi world. Orochimaru's influence was vast, and the temptation of power was something that not even Sasuke, with all his pride and strength, could resist. It was the perfect storm, a storm that would test not just Naruto's strength but his resolve. As they ventured into the unknown, Naruto's thoughts lingered on Mihawk's words. Use it to find clarity. The sky-cutting slash was more than just a technique, it was a reflection of his growth, a reminder of the path he had chosen. Sasuke's path was his own to walk now, and all Naruto could do was make sure he stayed true to his. The journey to find Sasuke would not be easy. The road ahead was fraught with danger, and the stakes were higher than ever. But Naruto knew that this mission, the one that would take him into the heart of Orochimaru's lair, was more than just a mission to bring Sasuke back. It was a test. A test of Naruto's strength, of his will, and of the man he was becoming. And when he faced Sasuke again, it would not be as rivals. It would be as men who had chosen their paths and as warriors who would fight, not just for the future, but for the clarity of their own souls. And when the time came, Naruto would strike with the sky-cutting slash because sometimes, the only way to cut through the darkness was to split the heavens themselves. The mission had reached its final stage. It had been days of tracking, traversing treacherous landscapes, and barely escaping enemy ambushes. But nothing could prepare Naruto for the final confrontation that awaited him. They had arrived at the Valley of the End, a place where history had been written in the blood of past warriors, a place where the final battle between the founders of Konoha had once sealed the fate of the village. Now, it was the setting for a battle that could change everything for Naruto and for Sasuke. Sasuke stood on the other side of the river, the curse mark's dark power pulsating around him like an aura of destruction. His eyes were no longer the calm, calculating eyes that Naruto had known. Instead, they were filled with a cold, unyielding fire, a hunger for strength that was no longer tempered by the bonds of friendship. His Sharingan glowed ominously, and Naruto could sense the transformation within him. Sasuke was no longer the boy he had once called a friend. You should have stayed in Konoha, Naruto, Sasuke's voice echoed across the valley, tinged with bitterness. But you can't understand what it's like. I need power, and I'm willing to do anything to get it. Even if it means destroying everything that stands in my way. Naruto's eyes narrowed, a flash of hurt crossing his features. You're wrong, Sasuke. I'm not the one who's lost my way. I've never stopped caring about you. But Sasuke, lost in his ambition, didn't respond. His aura crackled with energy, and he stepped forward, ready to begin the battle. This was it, the final confrontation between two former comrades, bound by a past now shattered by ambition and rage. The battle began in an explosion of power. Sasuke charged first, the air crackling around him as he summoned his signature Chidori. But this was no ordinary Chidori, it was an evolved form, a torrent of crackling lightning that surged toward Naruto like a spear of pure destruction. The sound of the Chidori's crackle filled the air, a deafening roar as it tore through the space between them. Naruto responded in kind. He drew Yori with a fluid motion, his chakra infused into the blade. The sword's dark aura flared as Naruto slashed forward, and in that instant, a wave of swirling wind and fire erupted from the blade. The Rei's non-blade slash collided with Sasuke's Chidori stream, and the impact sent shockwaves across the valley. The clash of their attacks shook the very ground beneath their feet, creating cracks that splintered the earth. The sheer force of their collision sent gusts of wind spiraling outward, uprooting trees and sending debris flying in all directions. Naruto's eyes were wide with determination, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the difference between them. Sasuke's power, amplified by the curse mark, was formidable. But Naruto's own strength had grown exponentially, his bond with Yura making him an even more dangerous opponent. And with Mihawk's teachings, he knew that this battle wasn't just about strength, it was about control, precision, and resolve. Sasuke stumbled back, momentarily thrown off balance by the force of the impact. He growled, the curse mark flaring around his body as he activated it fully, his muscles bulging and his eyes burning with rage. I won't lose to you. Sasuke snarled, charging again, this time with more ferocity. His Sharingan spun rapidly as he unleashed another barrage of Chidori, sending out multiple lightning-fast strikes at Naruto from every angle. But Naruto was ready. The observation haki coursed through him, sharpening his senses to an extraordinary level. He could see every move Sasuke was about to make, the subtle shifts in his stance, the flicker of his eyes as he prepared to strike. With perfect precision, Naruto parried and dodged, his sword dancing through the air in a flurry of slashes that cut through Sasuke's lightning-fast attacks. Each swing of Yuri was a counter to Sasuke's speed, each slash a step closer to victory. The blade cleaved through the air with deadly intent, sending waves of destructive chakra into the ground, leaving scars in the earth that mirrored the violence of their battle. Sasuke's attacks were fast, but Naruto's ability to predict and react made it impossible for Sasuke to land a decisive blow. With a sudden burst of chakra, Naruto appeared directly in front of Sasuke, slashing downward with Yuru. Sasuke barely had time to react, raising his arm to block, but the power behind the strike was overwhelming. The blade struck Sasuke's defense, cutting through the air and leaving a deep gash in his arm. Sasuke winced, but he refused to falter. Is this all you've got, Sasuke? Naruto said through gritted teeth, his voice low but firm. You're better than this. Sasuke's eyes blazed with fury. He activated his Sharingan to its fullest, and the world around him seemed to slow. Every movement of Naruto's was now visible to him in excruciating detail. Sasuke smirked, the arrogance of his new power shining through. You think you can win, Naruto? You think you can stop me? Sasuke's voice was filled with venom. I've already surpassed you. You're nothing but a fool. But Naruto didn't flinch. He could feel the weight of Sasuke's words, but he refused to let them control him. The truth was, Naruto had already surpassed the old version of himself, the one who had been weighed down by the village's expectations, the one who had craved recognition. Now, he fought not for validation, but for the future he wanted to create. And in that moment, Naruto's eyes flickered with determination. Using his haki, he read Sasuke's movements before the Uchiha even knew what he was going to do. With a flash, Naruto sidestepped Sasuke's attack, bringing Yura down in a crushing diagonal strike. The blade cut through Sasuke's defenses with ease, leaving a deep, bleeding gash across his chest. Sasuke staggered back, gasping for breath. His Sharingan flared once again, but the blood seeping from his wounds was a reminder of just how close he was to defeat. But Naruto didn't strike again. He stood there, sword in hand, his chest rising and falling as he breathed deeply, watching Sasuke struggle. There was a moment of silence between them, a moment where the anger, the rivalry, and the hurt seemed to dissipate. Naruto's gaze softened, his heart heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. Sasuke, Naruto said quietly, his voice almost pleading. This isn't the way. You don't have to go down this path. You don't have to throw everything away. But Sasuke's eyes were cold, filled with resolve. He pushed himself to his feet, wincing in pain but standing tall nonetheless. The curse mark flared again, his chakra rising to dangerous levels. I've made my choice, Sasuke said, his voice dark. And I won't let anyone stand in my way. Naruto's heart ached as he saw the anger in Sasuke's eyes, the pain that drove him forward. He hesitated, his hand hovering over his sword. For a brief moment, he considered delivering the final blow, ending the battle, and saving Sasuke from himself. But something held him back. A voice inside his head told him that this wasn't the answer. Killing Sasuke would only solidify his descent into the very darkness they had both fought against. Instead, Naruto lowered his sword, his gaze unwavering. I won't fight you anymore, Sasuke. If you want to leave, then leave. But remember this: no matter where you go, I'll always be here. I'll always be waiting for you to come back. Sasuke didn't respond. Without a word, he turned and fled, disappearing into the darkness with Orochimaru, leaving Naruto standing alone in the Valley of the End. The battle had ended. But for Naruto, the war for Sasuke's soul had just begun. The wind swept across the Valley of the End, carrying with it the weight of the battle that had just transpired. Naruto stood there, staring at the spot where Sasuke had vanished, his heart heavy with the defeat of not only the mission, but also the loss of his once close friend. His eyes were filled with conflicting emotions: disappointment, sorrow, and above all, determination. The failure to bring Sasuke back was not a wound that would heal quickly. Naruto knew that. His mind replayed the fight over and over again, the way he had hesitated, the way he had given Sasuke the chance to escape. It wasn't a decision he regretted, but it was a reminder of how fragile the bonds they once shared had become. Sasuke had chosen a path of darkness, and despite Naruto's best efforts, he couldn't change that. But he also knew this: he couldn't let Sasuke's decision define him. The road ahead was long, and Naruto would walk it with the same conviction that had fueled his journey from the start. Back in Konoha, Naruto's return was met with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The mission to retrieve Sasuke had failed, and the villagers couldn't help but question whether Naruto had done enough, whether he was strong enough. Some whispered behind his back, while others held their tongues, unsure of what to make of his growing power. But it was Mihawk who had been the steady presence in Naruto's life during these trying times. His mentor's words echoed in his mind as he meditated beneath the quiet, moonlit sky. You've taken your first steps toward true mastery. But a swordsman's journey never ends. The world is vast, and your blade has much more to cut. Naruto clenched his fists as he stood, the weight of yore resting against his side. He had trained for so long, pushed himself beyond his limits, but the events with Sasuke had shown him just how much further he still had to go. He wasn't just a shinobi anymore. The path he was on now was one that transcended the boundaries of the ninja world, a path that connected the traditions of the samurai and the warrior spirit of the shinobi. He had always known that power alone wasn't enough. But now, the failure to save Sasuke had crystallized the realization that there was more to being strong than simply defeating your enemies. It was about protecting the people who remained, building something stronger than the pain that held the world together. Naruto knew that his journey, like Mihawk had said, was only just beginning. Days passed, and the weight of his failure lingered, but it was tempered by a newfound sense of purpose. Naruto's resolve had solidified in the aftermath of the Valley of the End. He would not allow Sasuke's departure to be the end of his story. Instead, it would serve as a reminder that there would always be those who chose darkness, and it would be his responsibility to stand against that darkness. But he had also realized something else. While Sasuke had chosen his own path, Naruto had to choose his one that didn't just involve chasing after his former comrade. He needed to carve out his own destiny, to prove that he was not just a tool to be used by the village or the people around him. He would be a symbol of something greater: unity. Konoha had always been his home, but it was a place divided by its past and the shadows of old conflicts. The shinobi world had been built on a foundation of wars, betrayals, and mistrust. But what if he could change that? What if, through his strength, he could unite not just the ninja, but the samurai as well. He had seen enough in his travels with Mihawk to know that the samurai held principles that could complement the shinobi way. The two worlds could come together, united under a common purpose. Naruto made a vow to himself. He would seek out the legendary weapons, the forgotten techniques, and the warriors who had shaped history, and he would learn from them. With every new skill, every new technique, he would grow stronger. But he would also grow wiser, learning not just how to fight, but how to lead, to bring people together. He would create a new path, one where the lines between ninja and samurai blurred, where the old ways of conflict could finally be put to rest. His first step on this new journey would be to seek out more legendary blades. Mihawk's teachings had shown him the importance of mastery in the art of the sword, but Naruto understood that mastery was an ongoing pursuit. There were countless weapons and techniques scattered across the world, each one a piece of history, a tool that could be wielded to shape the future. Naruto's mind raced as he thought of the possibilities. He had already begun to understand the true power of Yoru, the way the sword was more than just a weapon, it was an extension of his will. But Yoru was not the only blade that held the potential for greatness. There were other swords, other weapons with the power to change the world. Each one, like Yoru, would test him, but it would also teach him something new. He would travel far and wide, seeking out these legendary blades. But beyond the swords, Naruto knew that true power lay in the mastery of techniques that had been lost to time. There were still ninjutsu, kenjutsu, and martial arts techniques that had not been fully explored, powers that could amplify his abilities and bring him closer to his goal of becoming a protector, a true warrior. Mihawk appeared to him one evening, watching Naruto as he practiced in the quiet fields outside Konoha. The old swordsman's gaze was sharp, his expression unreadable. After a long silence, Mihawk finally spoke. "You're on the right path, Naruto," he said, his voice deep with approval. "But the world you seek to unite is not one that will change easily. It will take more than power. It will take conviction. You must understand this, a sword can cut through flesh, but it cannot cut through hearts. You must learn to wield your heart as you wield your blade." Naruto nodded, absorbing the weight of Mihawk's words. The journey ahead would not be easy. The world was full of challenges both from outside and within. But Naruto was ready. He had learned the hard lessons of failure, and now, he was prepared to forge a new path. With his resolve firm, he looked out toward the horizon. The future was uncertain, and the road ahead was long, but for the first time in a long while, Naruto felt a sense of peace. He was no longer defined by his past, his failures, or the burdens others had placed on him. He was his own man, and the world would know his name not as a tool, but as a protector, a warrior, and a symbol of unity. As Naruto sheathed Yoru, a spark of hope flickered in his heart. He would carve out his own future, one swing of the sword at a time. The journey was far from over, it had only just begun.